Today, I am going to try and put into tears pretty much every single video game franchise ever created. The only two stipulations being that I have to have played to completion at least one game in the series, and if it's a multiplayer only title or series, then I have to have played at least 10 hours of one of the games in that series. There are going to be some I haven't played, there are going to be some maybe I've only tried out through demos or similar, and if there are, they'll go on the never played list. I'm sure there's going to be a million things I forget as well, so apologies in advance for that. Right, let's get started. Street Fighter, I'm going to go with very good for me. I'm not a huge fighting game person, as you'll come to see as I continue to work my way through this list, but Street Fighter for me is a classic. I remember my mum would take me to the swimming pool, and in between waiting for my lessons and going home, we would play Street Fighter 2 in the arcade for hour after hour until she eventually dragged me and my brother or whoever I was with off it. It is an incredibly influential franchise, and although maybe there was a bit of a dip after 2, it's come back really strong with 4, 5 and 6, which although not my bag and I've not really played apart from 4, which I did enjoy playing online even if I did get smashed pretty much the entire time, it's hard not to say that the franchise has had a massive resurgence over the last decade or so and has been fantastic for quite a while now. So very good, but not, it's one I'll check out, but it's not one I'm going to kind of be buying as soon as it comes out. Red Dead is also a very good. Both Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2 are fantastic. My experience of Red Dead Revolver is a little vaguer. I do remember playing it, I think, on the PlayStation 2, but when and for how long, I cannot remember for the life of me. Red Dead Redemption 1 is an absolute classic. There is nothing I remember quite so fondly in any Western game as going over into Mexico and realising there was this extra massive bit of world for you to explore. I've recently played Red Dead 2 through to completion, and I really enjoyed it. I loved the story. It's obviously incredibly immersive. The detail is extreme to the point of just, it blows my mind. The only thing I would say is I think the gameplay mechanics at times can feel a little clunky. Things like tapping A to run, not great in the present, considering that was something we had to do in Grand Theft Auto 3, which came out in 2001. So there are some improvements I think could have been made, but on the whole it's a fantastic series. And Red Dead Redemption 2, sorry, while not probably in my top 10, I think it will be in a lot of people's top 10, and that's completely understandable. So yeah, it's a fantastic series. Halo, if you know my channel, is always going to be a masterpiece. I didn't have an Xbox, I got a PlayStation 2 at launch, and I was very happy with my PlayStation 2. I'd had a PlayStation, very happy bunny, and then I went round a friend's house, I played Halo Combat Evolved on the Xbox, and my jaw absolutely hit the floor, never to come up again. It's one of the most influential games of all time. I still think it's my favourite console first-person shooter, and during Bungie's tenure, the series was consistently fantastic, right up until they finished with Reach. Since then, it has dropped so much, but as I said, this is all my personal opinion, and Infinite was a rise from 4 and 5, which were middling to poor depending on your opinion. So yeah, Halo, love it to death, always have, always will. Grand Theft Auto is another masterpiece series. I started playing these back in the late 90s with Grand Theft Auto 1, Grand Theft Auto London, and the second, which are obviously these top-down views. I could scarcely believe my eyes when I saw Grand Theft Auto 3 in the magazines. I was only about 13 at the time. I could scarcely believe what I'd seen, and then it came out, and for some reason I managed to convince my mother that it was an okay game for a 13-year-old lad to get. I don't think she quite realised what the content of Grand Theft Auto 3 was. Bless her, she bought it for me anyway, and it's, along with a couple of other games I'm going to mention, one of those rare times when I've been so excited about a game and it's completely lived up to expectations. Vice City, probably my favourite, followed. I love everything about it, the 80s, the music, the colour scheme, fabulous, obviously in the mould of a lot of old kind of, you know, it's almost like Scarface the video game in certain ways. Better than Scarface the actual video game for sure. And then San Andreas, while not my bag so much in terms of the setting and the tone of it, I still enjoyed. 4 is fantastic, 5 is fantastic, and I'm sure 6 will be fantastic too. One of the things you get with Rockstar is consistent quality pretty much constantly, and that's the same with Grand Theft Auto. It is a masterpiece series. Mass Effect I'm going to put in very good. I think the original trilogy are superb. I think the first one has some issues nowadays when you go back to play it. Obviously, at the time it wasn't so bad, but you go and play it now, I think the combat is clunky. I think the driving the Mako, I think it's called, around on the planets is shockingly bad. And even with a little tidy up for the Ultimate Collection or whatever it's called recently, there are a few parts of that game which I think were just beyond saving. And while I do say Mass Effect came out in 2007 or whatever, it has to be remembered that even at the time, you know, we'd had Resident Evil 4, we'd had Gears of War at the time, so there were third-person shooters that had kind of led the way in terms of how that style of things should be done. And I know Mass Effect was predominantly meant to be more an RPG, but if you're going to have third-person shooting, you know, you have to be considered a third-person shooter as well, which it is. 2 is one of the best games ever made. Nothing bad to say about it whatsoever. 3 is very, very, very good, apart from the ending, which was obviously a big disappointment, although that was improved. And Andromeda, I didn't hate, but equally, I don't know that it needed these open worlds kind of driving around in the whatever the thing was called that you drove around in. It was fine, and it was improved after a few patches, but you know, there were plasticine-faced monsters, some of the characters. The dialogue was very dodgy in places. I'm sure many of you remember the "my face is tired" line when she's holding her face in her hand. There's bits like that that are an issue, but still, I will buy any Mass Effect title immediately. I love the series. The Sims, I would put it horrible. It's not quite trash tier. If there was some kind of incredible Sims game that came out that completely changed the mould for the series, I might play it. And I put it just above trash tier because my wife absolutely loves playing The Sims still. I think The Sims 4 or whatever the most recent one is, I haven't got a clue. But to me, the most of the Sims I've played was maybe the first and possibly the second one, which was trapping people in front of a fireplace with tables so they set a light around the person, sticking them in a swimming pool, pulling up the ladder and just letting them kind of float around until death. Beyond that, maybe it says more about me, my habits playing the game than the series itself. But beyond that, I have pretty much zero interest in The Sims. It's not really my bag at all. Castlevania is definitely a masterpiece series. Symphony of the Night is, again, I don't know if it would make my top 10 games ever made, but it would certainly be in my top 50. It is an extremely strong title. I recommend everybody play at least once if you can get past, you know, it's a little bit old nowadays. Obviously, the older games are all classics as well, and while it hasn't been quite as prevalent in the present day, I still love it to death, and I will still play Castlevania games as they come out. Absolutely love the series. I'm going to let you in on a little secret regarding me and Resident Evil. I have 2 series that I love more than anything else, and that is Halo and that is Resident Evil. I listen to Resident Evil podcasts when I sleep. That is my main source of entertainment when I go to sleep, because otherwise I have to listen to my own thoughts and it's irritating. I listen to Resident Evil podcasts, I would say 90% of the time I go to bed, so that's every night, maybe 6 out of 7 or sometimes 7 out of 7 days a week. That is the level of obsession we're talking here, and I'm talking like 2-hour, 3-hour, 4-hour in-depth podcasts, each about like just one of the games in the series. I got the first I didn't buy the first Resident Evil. I was lent the first Resident Evil from a very naughty friend who nicked it off his dad. I was blown away. I don't think I managed to finish it when I first played it, but it was just amazing to me. I don't think I'd ever played a horror game before at the time. And by the time kind of 2 and 3 came around and I knew what I was doing and I could actually finish them when I was maybe like 10 years old, I was just obsessed. And I've been obsessed now for a long, long time. The series had a dip, in my opinion, with kind of 4, 5, 6. 4 is a classic. It is revolutionary. But I've always been about the Umbrella Corporation, the viruses, that side of things, which 4 kind of lost as it went into this more action side of things. It didn't maybe carry through the story as much as I would like. 5 is okay, 6 is a disaster, and then 7 and 8 I like, but not as much as the remakes where it goes back to just the tradition. I would like more zombies, basically. I just want zombie Resident Evil in the present day that's not a remake, but it's a masterpiece series to me. Cannot get enough of it. Listen to it every night. King of Fighters I've little experience with. Mortal Kombat is a mid for me. I play Mortal Kombats often when they're released is a lie. I play them a little bit when they're released. Not when they're released, just after they've come out, when the prices kind of come down a bit, or maybe you can get them for quite cheap on PC or something. They're fine. I enjoy them. I think they're very serviceable fighting games. I don't like them like I enjoy Street Fighter. Back in the day, obviously, used to love them when I was a kid because it felt very edgy to be playing Mortal Kombat and seeing all the blood spilling out, especially when you could do the code on the Mega Drive / Genesis. I think we were playing it on, and there was a code you could enter at the splash screen at the start, which would give you more blood. And I love the characters they bring in from other franchises in it. I know they've recently done Omni-Man from Invincible and Peacemaker from Peacemaker. And seeing them interact with the characters from Mortal Kombat or other characters they brought in are great. And I know they had all the horror characters in the past. You had Freddy Krueger and I think Jason Voorhees and the like. Love all that stuff. I think it's a brilliant way of getting more people interested in the game who might not have been otherwise. But yeah, I'm not super fussed about the series. I'm going to assume the VS is like the Marvel versus Capcom, that kind of thing, and I'm going to put that as maybe not good. I'm less interested in this. I was really interested in maybe Marvel versus Capcom 3 when they bought Nemesis in. I think that was the one I bought. I think maybe it had Wesker appear at some point and Jill Valentine from Resident Evil. So that was the versus game I played quite a lot, Marvel versus Capcom 3. And I believe I played a little bit of 2 on the Dreamcast in the past, but I'm not like mega fussed about the versus series. If cool characters from other series are brought in, yeah, I might give it a go. Battlefield for me, I struggle between good and above average. I think I'm going to go for good. I started playing Battlefield when the series first started with 1942, and that was an amazing game. It was difficult to play because I had a 56k internet connection at the time, which meant things bounced around on the screen at times. There'd be a tank over here, then there'd be a tank over there with no transition in between. Battlefield 2 is fabulous as well. Battlefield 3 and 4, also excellent, but there have been some dodgy titles in between. Battlefield 2042 and then later Battlefield 2142 is the new one, I think. And a couple of other titles I've not been so enamoured by. When Battlefield is good, it is great. And Battlefield 4 I was absolutely obsessed with for a while when it came out on the PlayStation 4. I think it was maybe a launch title. Playing 64-player Battlefield 4 on the PlayStation 4 near or at launch was amazing to me. It really showed off the console. But yeah, there's enough stinkers that I can't put it any better than good, and even good might be generous. Medal of Honor, I'm going to go with good as well. This is another war-based shooting series which has let itself down, but whereas with Battlefield it's very up and down, seemingly almost at random, with Medal of Honor it was an upwards followed by a downwards trajectory in very quick succession. So Medal of Honor was actually developed by, I believe they were called 141 Games or 141 something studio. I don't know if they did the 2 PlayStation titles, Medal of Honor and Medal of Honor Underground, but they certainly developed Medal of Honor Allied Assault. And Medal of Honor Allied Assault is a wonderful, wonderful game. I'm sure you all remember the beach scene, the Omaha beach scene. I think it's Omaha Beach. The D-Day scene with everybody running up the beach, which was also Medal of Honor Frontline, another game I loved, which first came out on the PlayStation 2. That was really the high point for the series, though. After that, there were a couple more games that were okay. I think there was it Medal of Honor Rising Sun or something like that, I think it was called, which was pretty fun. I believe you could play it split-screen co-op on the Xbox, maybe, which I quite enjoyed. But then there were the modern games. There was Airborne, I think, which was fine, but it's never really managed to recover from the tailspin that it arguably went into the early to mid-noughties. So yeah, good, and, you know, I'd love to see it revived with a World War II game. That would be brilliant for me. An Allied Assault Frontline-esque World War II game would be tremendous, and that would really make my ears prick up. But for now, it's good based on distant past merits. Minecraft is a masterpiece. I've only probably played a little over 10 hours of Minecraft, so it just about fits in with my stipulations, maybe a bit more. I have played it myself to try it out back when, I think maybe it was even a browser-based game, wasn't it, at one point? I can't remember off the top of my head. But I have played Minecraft, but not a lot of Minecraft. But I've also played Minecraft with relatives, younger relatives. And the level of imagination it draws from them, I think, is incredible. It's obviously been a huge cultural phenomenon for many, many years. It's a masterpiece game. I don't think anybody can deny that. For a game that was developed initially by one person, I think it was one person, to be what it is today and to have had the effect it had on so many people, I think it has to be considered a masterpiece on pretty much every level. Forza is above average for me. I loved Forza Motorsport 2. That was my obsession for a long time on the Xbox 360. I still listen to the soundtrack from it to this day. I love the collection of songs they have. I have a Forza 2 playlist on my Spotify that I often dive into. Since then, I revisit them when they come out. I don't tend to play them for hours and hours, and I become less interested in the motorsport titles over time. I'm not a big car person. I don't get excited about, you know, the looks of cars, what's under the hood, that kind of thing. So that obviously diminishes some of the motorsport side of things. And I've always only really been into the F1 myself. Really into is a stretch. I watch the F1 sometimes. But the Horizon games have always been really, really fun. I've got nothing bad to say about them. So yeah, I'll check out a Forza game when it comes out, especially now they're mostly on Game Pass. Why not? Call of Duty is another good. There seems to be a pattern here emerging among the Battlefields, the Medal of Honours, the Call of Duty. I think you could say Call of Duty has been more consistently decent. There are some titles that aren't quite as good in Call of Duty. You know, I wasn't a big fan of, say, Ghosts, for example, or Advanced Warfare. And some of the newer ones I haven't played so much. I've pretty much started to fall out of love with Call of Duty around the Black Ops time. But when you look at some of the games the series has produced, especially the original Call of Duty 2, which was an amazing Xbox 360 launch title, really showed off what an HD console could do, because high definition was very new at the time. Modern Warfare, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare is obviously one of the best first-person shooters ever made, and I loved World at War just for the zombies mode. The zombies mode in World at War was still my favourite. Zombies simple is always better. And there's been some good stuff since then. Obviously, the first Modern Warfare from the reboot especially was excellent. I quite liked Cold War that I played recently as well. But yeah, it can be very up and down, and I dislike the multiplayer in general, especially what it's become these days. I don't find it fun at all. Doom, I think, goes as a very good franchise for me. Obviously, I remember playing Doom when you had to use kind of the keyboard to look left and right. You couldn't even look up and down back in the day. Doom 2, again, absolute classics. Doom 3 was an okay title, which I think will be remembered more for its technical prowess as opposed to how good it is as a game. It was a good game, but tonally it was maybe strayed a bit too far from what Doom was meant to be. And then Doom and Doom Eternal, the more recent titles, completely brought it back. I've only played a tiny bit of Doom Eternal, I must confess, and I've been meaning to get round to it for a long time. But the reboot of Doom was a marvellous, marvellous game. I had a lot of fun with it. It really is one of those examples of taking something beloved and transforming it perfectly, modernising it perfectly in a way which makes sense. It's just fantastic. And the soundtrack as well is out of this world. Guilty Gear I've little experience of. Persona for me, no, I'll put it as a good as well. I really like the Persona series. People will say, oh, well, you can't like it. I've only played 4 and 5. Some people will say, oh, we don't really like it that much. I really like the Persona series that I have played. 4 is a brilliant game. Better than 5, I think, although 5 is immensely stylish and I really enjoyed. I struggled with 5 a little bit because it got to about hour 80, and I think by then I was, ready for the game to end. But they're beautifully made titles, very stylish. I've little to say about them apart from maybe they could do with a bit of editing down, although some people might not agree. Looking forward to playing Persona 3 as well. Now it's been re-released it's been modernised. I know that's on Game Pass. So yeah, Persona 6, for example, I will definitely play when it comes out. So I would say, yeah, good. Shin Megami Tensei, I've very little experience of. Wolfenstein for me is, again, a war shooter in the good category. What a surprise. Wolfenstein for me, obviously the original, again, like Doom, one of the foundational titles for the first-person shooter genre. I don't know if any of you remember playing it. Hopefully some of you watching do, or have played it in more recent times. You could fight, I think Hitler had the 2 miniguns at the end. You had to fight him, he had the 2 miniguns. Maybe he was in a robot suit, I seem to remember. Could be wrong, could be making all of that up. Return to Castle Wolfenstein, which came later, is one of my favourite, I think it's one of the best multiplayer shooters ever made. I played Return to Castle. It was the first online shooter I really got into. Well, that and Quake 3 around the same time. And I was obsessed with it, and I still think it's one of the best online shooters ever made, as was Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, which followed it up, although I wasn't quite as enamoured with that. Both those games, though, my parents lost their minds with me, because I would get home from school, not do my homework, and just play from about kind of 5:30 to about 10:30, 11 at night. I would just play Wolfenstein. That's all I'd do. I was absolutely obsessed, way too obsessed with them. There was then that 2007, 2009 game, which was okay, where there was a bit of an open world that led you off into that kind of branched out into linear levels. And I enjoyed the newer action-focused titles, which were more kind of perhaps what you'd expect from the series, again similar in the mould to the Doom reboot. I liked the New Order and the New Colossus. So yeah, it's a series I'm interested in. If there was ever a new Return to Castle Wolfenstein announced, this would potentially be bumped up to a very good for me. Devil May Cry is very good. I have not played so much Devil May Cry over maybe the last 5-10 years, but certainly Devil May Cry 2 and Devil May Cry 3 they're all pretty good. I mean, Devil May Cry 2 was maybe a dip in quality, let's be honest, but Devil May Cry was a superb game. That came out during that amazing 2001, where I think we got Devil May Cry, Halo Combat Evolved, Tony Hawk's 3, Silent Hill 2, Grand Theft Auto 3. It was just an absurd year. Did I say Silent Hill 2? If I didn't, Silent Hill 2. It was an absurd year for video games, which had arguably, like, I did a video on it a while back. Some of the greatest games ever released came out in 2001. I think it's, along with maybe 1998, probably the best year in gaming, full stop. I will play a Devil May Cry if it comes out again, maybe. I've got the newer ones on my list to play. I think, is it 5 was the most recent one? Oh, and I played 4 back in the day as well. I remember playing 4 on the Xbox 360. I need to go round to playing 5 if that's the most recent one, but the thing is, a little bit of my issue with Devil May Cry these days is I don't play a lot of fighters, especially anymore, and, you know, games which rely on combos and that kind of thing, and that is a lot of the fun with Devil May Cry, is getting really good at the combos and that kind of thing. I remember trying to, you know, get the highest rank on the original for goodness knows how long. I used to sit there and do it, whereas these days I'm not so fond of the button presses, especially since I'm getting a bit older and my reflexes have gone downhill, but still, love the series. Bayonetta, I'd go with above average. I finished the first one. I was not as fond of it in terms of its kind of tone and aesthetic as I am Devil May Cry. I like Bayonetta as a character, but I'm not jumping out into the shop to get it the day it comes out. Bayonetta 2 or 3 I haven't played yet. So yeah, I'm interested in the series, but not super interested. Lego, gonna go... Oh, no, actually... No, I am going to go with trash. Lego, for me, I just never really got into it. I tried to play a few of the games. I did like the first Lego Star Wars. I bought and complete the first Lego Star Wars. And actually, I loved Lego Kart Racing, I think, on the original PlayStation. But beyond that, I've tried to play the other Lego games, and I just don't feel like there's ever been that much difference between those, between the games mechanically. Sometimes there's something interesting with them, like I know it was it Lego Lord of the Rings or Lego Hobbit? I can't remember what it was. Had an open world and things, but beyond that, yeah, I'm not got any interest in it. Elder Scrolls Masterpiece series. I haven't played Arena or Daggerfall. Really, I think I tried to play Daggerfall, but I don't think I even got out of the starting dungeon. Morrowind is one of the best role-playing games ever made. Oblivion is very, very good too. Skyrim is very good. I know some people would rate Skyrim the highest. I do not. I think there has been a dumbing down of mechanics over time with those games. Something so wonderful about Morrowind, which has been lost, was that the game didn't really... And obviously, this is something over time video game companies have learned to do, which is if you make your game more accessible, more people will buy and play it. Morrowind lacked elements of accessibility that Oblivion and Skyrim had, but it was an amazing experience when you were trying to figure out where to go and what to do, and I wish some of that would come back to the series. Given Bethesda's issues in recent years, I am not as excited about the next Elder Scrolls as I think I would have been a year ago before Starfield came out, because I did not like Starfield. But still, the Elder Scrolls is a masterpiece series, as is Fallout. Now, we have to take away from that, when we think about Fallout as a masterpiece series, we have to take away 76, which I'm sure some people like. I tried playing it before a lot of the updates were done, so it might be better now. And I was on the fence about Fallout 4. I didn't have a bad time playing it, but considering it was one of the games I was most excited about ever, because I loved Fallout 3, it let me down in places. I really liked the map. I liked the more lush map, more lush map that Fallout 4 had, and I really liked the denseness of the city in the bottom section of the map. But I thought the side quests were very lacking. I thought they were not particularly well fleshed out, and they didn't feel as substantial as I would have liked. I liked Fallout 3 where there were maybe 20, but they were all decent side quests. In Fallout 4, I felt like there were only maybe 2 or 3 I remember. I'm trying to remember them now. Maybe the one where there's robots on a pirate ship. Can't really remember that well. And I thought the main quest was an interesting idea. I liked how it kind of took that synth storyline from 3 and kind of brought it forward, but I don't think it were. I think there were too many plot holes, which I'm not going to go into now, but I think there were plot holes and it just didn't play out quite as well as I would have liked. Fallout 1 and 2, absolute classics. Fallout New Vegas, better than any of the Fallouts Bethesda has developed. Personally, I think Fallout New Vegas, the level of choices and different outcomes is genuinely amazing. I'd actually love to make a video on it at some point, and maybe I will. Fallout 2 is superb, especially out of the 2 isometrics. And I haven't really played Tactics, or I think there's Brotherhood of Steel is another one. I haven't really played those. But yeah, Masterpiece series, I'll buy Fallout as soon as it comes out, every time. Super Mario is a masterpiece series. I will play pretty much every mainline Mario game. I don't tend to play a lot of the spin-off platformers, but if it's, you know, roughly a mainline game like 3D World or something like that, I will still play it. Super Mario 64 is a classic, one of the most incredible examples of a company taking an existing 2D franchise and translating it into 3D, which is a running theme with Nintendo franchises especially. Super Mario World is out of this world, if you'll excuse the pun, and obviously the original kind of solidified platformers as a genre that would be one of, if not the most popular for the next decade, arguably 2 decades after it came out. Although these days people aren't so fond of them. Galaxy as well is tremendous. Odyssey I thought was very, very good, if not a little bit bloated in places. So yeah, masterpiece series. Zelda for me is a very good, and I know people are going to get super mad about this one. I really like Zelda. Link's Awakening especially, and much like Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time was the way they handled the transition of that series to 3D, again, like Super Mario 64, was just beyond anything anyone could have expected. Wind Waker was controversial because of its aesthetic when it was first announced and came out, because there was that Space World trailer where they showed really awesome, cool, like regular Zelda-looking 3D gameplay for the GameCube. And then Wind Waker came out and was a bit controversial because it was cartoony. I think actually in the present day it holds up better than any Zelda title from maybe up until, you know, it got a bit more modern. I liked Twilight Princess well enough. I didn't particularly like Skyward Sword, and I apologise again to anybody watching this who is a big Breath of the Wild fan, but while I think it is a fantastic game, I think it is massively overrated. The idea that so many lists have that as it's the best game ever made, when they rank games like the top 100 games, is absurd to me. There are wonderful parts of it. The way you traverse the world, I think there wasn't that kind of Elder Scrolls almost moment of when you come out into the open world and you realise how big it is and stuff. But the story wasn't good. The side content wasn't good. I think it's a really, really good game. I think it's a really, really good game. I don't like it as much as, say, Ocarina of Time or most of the earlier Zelda titles, and I haven't played the newest one yet, which for some reason I've forgotten the name of, which is annoying. Metroid is another masterpiece series for me. Super Metroid, like, there's a reason Castlevania and Metroid are up here. Obviously, you've most likely heard of the Metroidvania style of game, which is the style of title these 2 games pioneered, which is you go around a map and you can kind of explore places a little bit, but what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to collect new abilities. When you collect those abilities, that you can then go back to places you previously visited and open up new paths. And it's an incredibly influential style of game that is still used on things all the time, even to this day. I mean, I even did a video on BioShock 2 add-on Minerva's Den the other day, pardon me. And even that had elements of Metroidvania where I had to go and get an ability like the Electro Bolt to use on a door to open it and things. So it's still seen to this day in so many games. Super Metroid is incredible. Another Nintendo franchise that made the transition to 3D superbly is Metroid, with Metroid Prime on the GameCube, which was that, and 2 brilliant. 2 maybe slightly less brilliant. 3 was also excellent. And then more recently, Metroid Dread I think was better than it had any right to be. Super hard boss battles I found, although again I'm getting old and maybe a bit rubbish at video games now. But yeah, Metroid series I'm always there for. I mean, there have been a couple of missteps. Other M, for example, which I thought was going to be brilliant, and it turned out to be middling at best. But yeah, I'm always there for the Metroid series, always. Dark Souls. We're not talking about From Soft here, which is intriguing, because I have to discount Bloodborne, Sekiro and things. I'm going to put Dark Souls in very good. The original Dark Souls is one of the best it's not quite a sequel, is it, but a pseudo sequel, I suppose you describe it as. Demon's Souls might be my favourite From Software game. There's something about the atmosphere, the sense of loneliness in that game especially, which no other game has. The Tower of Latria, is the Tower of Latria. Just in general, there's just this feeling it gives me that I don't know that any other title in the series has, although some of that may be me playing it for the first time and getting used to all the mechanics and stuff as well. It may just be, part of it may be that. Dark Souls is an incredible follow-up. The freedom that game gives you to go to... I think you can fight something like 7 or 8 different bosses as your first boss, which is amazing. And the interconnectedness of the levels. The first time you work your way through the Undead Burg at the start and then find yourself looping back round to the Firelink Shrine. It's just so good. Everything about it is so good. And I think at this stage with From Software and Miyazaki's work, it hadn't quite completely disappeared up its own arse in terms of how it tells its story. It hadn't got to like Elden Ring, where I feel like it's just Miyazaki putting a big middle finger up at you. To anyone who actually wants to follow that story the first time they play it through, good luck. 90% of people who say they followed it the first time, I think, are lying personally. No one knows what's going on with half the characters in those games the first time you play it. I did a video on it and some people were very offended, but anyway, Dark Souls 2 I think is okay. It's not the best game, but equally it's really fun. I've only played it twice. Dark Souls I think I've played about 4 or 5 times. Dark Souls 2 I've played twice, once because I didn't like it, and then I thought I'd go back and play it a second time to check that I didn't like it. And no, I don't particularly like it. I will play it because at its core Souls combat is still good, but there are a lot of things about it I wasn't a fan of. Dark Souls 3 I thought was an improvement, but not that great. It felt very linear to me at times. I loved some of the bosses. I can't remember is it the Nameless King you fight when you go into the clouds and he's riding a dragon? That is cool. And it was really, I think you visit I can't remember the name of the place. But you revisit a couple of, or maybe many locations from the first Dark Souls, but obviously after kind of the world has continued dying, which is really cool. And I really like the DLC for it as well. The DLC for actually all of the Dark Souls games have had excellent DLC. That is something that should be noted. Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 all have fantastic DLC. So yeah, very good, but I'm not quite putting it a masterpiece because I think the only game in the series I would describe as a masterpiece is the first one. Final Fantasy is another series which could have been masterpiece maybe 15 years ago, but it has been on a downward trajectory for quite some time. I have played every mainline Final Fantasy, excluding 11 and 14, the online titles. I played every one up to 16, which I've not got round to yet, and I'm not that excited about playing. I think the first 3 or 4 Final Fantasies, obviously you have to remember they came out a long time ago. They're a bit lighter on story, and I couldn't really go back to them these days so much. I might be wrong about Final Fantasy 3 or 4. I think one of them has a bit more story. But 5 and 6 I could go back to now and play the two SNES titles. They were brilliant. 7, 8, 9 is an incredible run of games, although 8 is fundamentally broken in the way you can progress. You can be so overpowered you never need to do anything else to level up or draw or whatever to complete the game just on the first disc. 10 is very good. I mourned the loss of a world map at the time and it felt to me a bit more constricted because of that, but over time I have let go of my misgivings regarding that, because it's still really, really good, and it has an aesthetic which is very, very unique. 12, good as well. I struggle. You could see the MMORPG stuff starting to creep in how some of it was handled. 13 has quite possibly the best soundtrack in any Final Fantasy game, full stop. I cannot get enough of 13's soundtrack. The graphics were amazing at the time, especially on PlayStation 3. I think actually on the 360 the resolution was slightly lower. I don't think it looked as good on the 360. Maybe they had to kind of squeeze it to get it onto a non-Blu-ray disc is the possibility. But beyond that, it's obviously very linear. The combat system was cool, watching the characters move around the battlefield, even though it was still a menu-based combat system. It was okay. Final Fantasy 15 was a middling game. I played it to completion, and it just felt like the story was just all over the place. One minute it was proceeding too fast, then like the final third could have been very interesting, but it seemed to zip by in record time. I can't remember what the villain's name was, which probably says it all, you know, considering I can name all the villains from all the other Final Fantasies. But I thought he was an Ardis. Ardis, is that right? Maybe I'm wrong. He was a compelling character when he turned up every now and then, but he just didn't appear enough that he was particularly threatening. And then Final Fantasy 16, I want to go and play, but I've heard that the side quests are dodgy, so I'm kind of waiting until it gets to bargain bin prices on PC and I'll play it. Oh, and Final Fantasy Remake, a 40-hour experience that could have been 8 hours and probably should have been about 8 hours. I thought it was a really nice way of bringing back Final Fantasy VII, one of the titles I hold closest to my heart. It's the first 3D RPG I played, and I love it to death. I still listen to the soundtrack all the time. But I thought the 40 hours of Final Fantasy VII Remake, where you constantly had to kind of crawl through things slowly or run around doing mindless fetch quests. If your side quests in your role-play game amount to little more than someone saying, "Oh, I've lost my 7 tortoises and I would really like my 7 tortoises back, please," and then you go and you run around a big area and press X on 7 tortoises, and then you go back to the man or woman and they say, "Thanks for finding my 7 tortoises," and then you leave. That's not a side quest worth putting in your game. That adds absolutely nothing to it. And Final Fantasy, especially 7 Remake, I thought at times veered into that kind of thing. Or, you know, there's some dogs in it somewhere. Can you go and kill the dogs? And you kill the dogs and then you go back and that's it. And there's nothing around it, you know. Anyway, it's a very good series. I will play every Final Fantasy as it comes out, but I feel like in recent years it's a bit... And I haven't played Rebirth yet, so, you know, maybe that will change my mind. Dragon Quest I'm not super familiar with. Quake is good for me. I didn't play tons of the first Quake. Obviously, that was predominantly a single-player game for a lot of people, just because of the internet connections at the time. But, you know, Quake World, which I think is based on the original Quake, I played a little bit of, although I got absolutely smashed trying to play it. Quake 3 Arena is a tremendous game. I preferred watching it a lot of the time to playing it. I used to watch, you know, Cooler, Cypher, Rafa, all of these kind of amazing Quake 3 players who have continued playing Quake through and have played other games. But man, Quake 3, watching 2 people go at it on Quake 3 was amazing. Great fun. Love the series. Quake 4, bit of a misstep. I think it was an Xbox 360 launch title, which I played and it was fine, but the series is kind of dead in the water now. I think if they brought it back in a good way, or maybe went back to their roots with an arena shooter, although saying that, I didn't really take any interest in Quake Champions. Maybe I moved this to above average, actually. I can't read what this says. Counter-Strike Masterpiece. I am obsessed with Counter-Strike. I started playing Counter-Strike with, I think, Counter-Strike 1.3 back in 2000, 2001, whenever it was around. Played it through to 1.5, 1.6, and then obviously moved on to Source, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and now CS2. I am obsessed with competitive Counter-Strike. I've been watching competitive Counter-Strike ever since I first saw some clips of Heaton from Ninjas in Pyjamas playing. There's that famous clip for some of you old school Counter-Strike heads out there, where I think he gets a 4 or a 5k against the 4 Kings on Aztec on 1.5 or 6 or whatever version it was they were playing. And seeing him do that, obviously not that impressive a clip nowadays compared to some of the insane aim people have in the present, but at the time it was jaw-dropping, and that ignited my love of competitive Counter-Strike, and I've been obsessed ever since. The Counter-Strike Major is coming up in Copenhagen. I think it's the first ever Counter-Strike Major in Denmark. I will watch nearly every minute of that. I think it's testament to how brilliant the series is, that it's not changed that much fundamentally over the years. You've always had the kind of bomb. I think it actually started out as only rescuing hostages. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word there. I think it only started out as rescuing hostages, but they introduced the A and B, you know, bombing, and it's not really changed that much. There has been changes, obviously, different weapons, new utility, like the Molotov introduced for global offensive and things like that. But it's still at its core, competitively, the same thing it's been for nearly 25 years now. And yeah, it's a masterpiece series. Team Fortress, above average. I played Team Fortress back in the day. We used to rotate between Counter-Strike, the original Team Fortress Classic, I guess you'd call it now, Team Fortress, and Natural Selection and Day of Defeat. Those were the Counter-Strike mods that we used to rotate between. We play a few in the evening, or maybe we just pick one of them and play it the whole time. But I was never as fond when it was one of our evenings we played Team Fortress. I liked Team Fortress well enough. I thought 2 was a really interesting game. I played it a lot when the Orange Box came out back in about 2007, and I really like class-based shooters. You know, as I said, Returns Class Wolfenstein, a class-based multiplayer shooter, was my bag. But I think it just came out at a time for me when I'd already kind of moved on to, I was already obsessed with Counter-Strike, heavily obsessed with, say, Counter-Strike at that point, and also kind of Call of Duty was beginning to come into the fold, you know, with Modern Warfare, that kind of thing, and Halo was a consistent game as well. So Team Fortress, like, if they do a Team Fortress 3 at some point, I'll give it a go, but yeah, not quite good enough to make the good category for me. Half-Life, yeah, straight to the top. Half-Life 1 is one of the... there are certain titles in the FPS genre that changed everything, and Half-Life 1 is obviously one of those games. The set pieces, the scripting, if you don't know what that means, I mean in terms of, it felt like you were in a living, breathing world. So instead of you just running around the level like Doom, you'd take a tram ride and you'd see things happening around you that you weren't directly involved in, that made you feel like Black Mesa was a real living place. Going into the lab, seeing the scientists walk around, they'll talk to you, they'll be banging on vending machines trying to get stuff out, and that goes on throughout the entire game. Incredible. But also there was a real sense of place with Black Mesa, because you weren't jumping between levels. There were loading screens. You would get a screen pop up that said, or like a few words would pop up saying loading, but then you'd carry on from exactly where you were before the loading screen. So it gave it this real sense of it being a journey, a sense of Black Mesa being a place you were trying to escape, trying to make your way through. Brilliant. And then Half-Life 2 took all of that and just upped the ante with especially the graphics, which were at the time top tier, but also the physics system. There had been physics systems in other games. I think sometimes people like to pretend that Half-Life 2 was the only game with a physics system. It wasn't, but it was the first game that really did it properly, and I think did it better than any other game, and also really integrated it into the way you played the game, you know, in terms of having to stack objects to move through areas. You know, you could shoot things to make things fall over or whatever else. Wonderful title. I haven't played Annex yet. I would like to play it. Oh, I forgot about episode 1 and 2. Episode 1 and 2 are also brilliant. Episode 2 especially, I think, is the better of the two. Left on a cliffhanger, which we've only just had some answers to with Half-Life Alyx. I haven't played Half-Life Alyx, but I did spoil myself a little bit with the plot because I was desperate to find out. It's interesting. Half-Life 2 was originally meant to then have these episodes, which are meant to be like every 3 months, I think. They were meant to be super... And this was during a time when episodic games were really being pushed by developers, until I think developers worked out that actually it's really hard to make loads of little games and release them really regularly. You know, even companies like Telltale or Don't Nod, who made Life is Strange. I mean, that was a bit later, Life is Strange. But even those games, you know, I think they were figuring out that even to make games less complex, perhaps mechanically, than Half-Life was a real struggle. And yeah, so we got this weird kind of cadence with the Half-Life episodes, and then they kind of stopped abruptly, and will there be a Half-Life 3? Who knows at this point. Portal is a good series for me. The original is a fabulous little kind of, I don't know if you call it an indie-esque game. Obviously, everybody knows the cake is a lie, memes and everything that came out of it. But it came out of it because the game itself is so very, very good. Wonderfully written, the character of GLaDOS. It's a great 3-hour experience. 2 was where I started to get a bit bored of it. I actually preferred it as a shorter experience. When they started to build it out, I really loved the co-op mode and I loved the extra additions they had to it. It's a very, very, very good game still. And a lot of people wanted the plot built out as well. Was it Cave Johnson or someone was the owner of the company of Aperture? That kind of thing. And I liked Stephen Merchant as Wheatley as well. I thought he did a really good job with the voice acting, considering I believe it was the first video game he ever voiced. And he was relatively unknown still back then. Or not unknown, that's not the right word, but he hadn't been in a lot of stuff himself. It was more him behind the camera and Ricky Gervais doing things. He did brilliantly as Wheatley as well. I will play Portal 3 when it comes out, but I'm not on the edge of my seat waiting for a Portal game to be released. Sonic for me probably goes in at below average now. I think the first video game I ever played beyond maybe a minute or two at like an aunt or uncle's or someone where I might have had to go on their Commodore 64. The first game I ever played properly was Sonic. I got a Master System for my Christmas present from my wonderful mum and dad. And it came preloaded with Sonic 1, but this was not the Sonic 1, Sonic the Hedgehog, I should call it, that most of you will remember that was on the Mega Drive / Genesis. It was like a trimmed down version to work in 8-bit, pretty much a completely different game, to be perfectly honest. And I loved it. Later graduated to playing the Mega Drive games. I absolutely loved Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 on the Dreamcast. I loved my little Dreamcast. It was a console that died before its time. But since then, Sonic has just been, it's been really rough. There have been the occasional highlights. I really liked Generations. Really, really liked Generations. I really, really liked Mania, which came out recently. But there is just so much dross in between that. You look at how Nintendo has handled the Mario series, and then you look at what Sega has done with the Sonic series, and the comparison is night and day. I've heard Frontiers is pretty good. Didn't look that good to me when I watched the gameplay, but I've heard it's okay, so maybe I'll go and give that a go. But in general, just some of the dreck that's come out of Sonic it has to go below average. Another series people are going to be annoyed at me for not really playing, I would guess, is Yakuza. I probably will never play Yakuza 1 to 7 or however many of them there are now. There's just too many to get into when I'm already trying to play other video games and do the YouTube, which takes a lot of time in and of itself. I might try and go and play Like a Dragon and the sequel that's just come out that I can't remember the name of, because they piqued my interest, especially with the kind of role-playing combat. I liked the look of those. But yeah, I haven't really played it at this stage just because I'm so daunted by how many games there are. Super Smash Bros. Is another good for me. Again, another series I grew up playing on the N64 when it was just called Smash Brothers, I think. I played it a lot on the GameCube. Melee, still probably the best Smash Brothers title to this day. I mean, it says it all that it's being played competitively still. From there, I have continued to play it now and then, but it's something I would just play every so often if a friend had a Switch. I really like Smash Brothers Ultimate, I think is the one on the Switch, is it? That seems really cool because I played that at a friend's, and having like pretty much every Smash Brothers character ever is awesome. But I've got to be honest, once I played a few games of Smash Brothers, I'm ready to move on to something else. Like I don't, and not because it's a fighting game, I don't know, just maybe the appeal of like fighting as all the different characters against each other over time has worn off possibly. So now it's just, to me, it's just, maybe it is just an fighting game. But yeah, like I'll play it. I might buy it if I get a Nintendo, maybe if I get the Switch 2, I'd imagine when that comes out, hopefully next year, I'd probably buy a Smash Brothers if it came out for it, just to have and just to play when mates are over. But I'm not, again, mega excited. Hearts of Iron, I've never played. Europa Universalis, I've never played. Victoria again. Crusader Kings again. Company of Heroes, I'm going to put mid. I really liked the first Company of Heroes. I played that to completion. I haven't really played the series since then, but I take a passing interest in them. I think what you might have realised from me putting Hearts of Iron, Europa, Victoria, Crusader Kings into the never played, strategy is also not my bag. It was a little bit when I was younger, but it hasn't been for a long time now. The doctors think I'm waiting for an ADHD diagnosis at the moment, and maybe that's something to do with it. It's a lack of patience, I would perhaps say. But yeah, I liked the first Company of Heroes, and I might go back to it in the future. A little bit of that might be to do with it being World War II. I love World War II. I'm fascinated by the history, so that certainly drew me in. Pokemon is below average for me. I don't really care about Pokemon anymore, and I used to care about Pokemon, but when I say used to care about Pokemon, I mean Pokemon Red, Blue, Gold, Silver, and then maybe, was it Diamond and Pearl that followed on the Game Boy Advance? That was the extent of me caring about Pokemon, and by that point they had not changed enough that I could continue to play the series. I think I tried to dip into Black and White on the DS, I think it was on the DS, and it didn't really feel like anything had changed when I went to that game. And just seeing what annoys me about Pokemon when I look at the more modern titles is there's such huge potential for them to do really awesome things with the open world and the interaction of the various Pokemon and stuff. And I know Game Freak are held back a little bit because Nintendo traditionally, or at least for the last maybe couple of decades, has had weaker hardware than the competition. So you're obviously not going to get a Pokemon game that looks like it's made on the PlayStation 5. But it just seems like it's a franchise that's just being milked for a long time. And they can get away with it because it's... I know a lot of adults play and love Pokemon, there's nothing wrong with that, but it is predominantly a series played by a lot of kids, and kids maybe don't notice like issues like graphics, and they don't care about that as much. And I think it's a series that is being milked when it could be something really, really special, and I think that's what annoys me about Pokemon. Ace Attorney is not good, and again, not good does not mean I don't think the series is good. Basically every series on this list is very good to a lot of people. A lot of people would consider very good. I'm just not really interested in Ace Attorney. I played the first one on the DS, I think it was, and I liked it well enough, but that was enough Ace Attorney for me, and I've never really been interested in revisiting it. Mega Man is probably below average at this stage. I used to play Mega Man when I was younger and want to put my controller through a wall or throw it out a window, because it was incredibly hard. I did enjoy the resurgence, I think maybe during the kind of PlayStation 3 generation, was it, with Mega Man 9 and 10? Was it Mega Man X? I can't remember what the name of them was, but when they brought Mega Man back, that was enjoyable. Hated Mighty Number 9, which I know isn't a Mega Man game, but I just wanted to say that I hated Mighty Number 9 because I hated it. Yeah, it's an okay franchise. I take a passing interest. Metal Slug is another series. I liked Metal Slug back in the day, much like Contra, which is about to come, and actually I'm going to put that here as well. These were games that were brilliant to play with friends, just blasting everything in sight. Contra was brutally difficult. I struggled to play that when I was young, struggled to get past the first few levels on most of them, especially playing kind of the 8 and 16-bit ones. I think I preferred Metal Slug, the slightly more cartoony aesthetic, but their games maybe I would take an interest in if they did something with, but not really. I've absolutely no idea, not a Scooby-Doo, what Two Who Project is, so yeah. Civilization, probably mid. 3 and 5 were the games I spent a lot of time with, and that was more off the back of hearing that they were really good rather than me taking a massive interest in the series. I would play future Civilization games if I heard they were like one of the best in the series that's ever come out, but at the same time, again, I'm waiting for feedback rather than actively seeking out the experience. The Last of Us for me is very good. I am obsessed with zombies, as I kind of alluded to earlier when I was talking about Resident Evil. So The Last of Us was right up my street. I'd known about the cordyceps fungi for many years, so the idea of that being taken and put into a video game just completely piqued my interest. And I'm a massive Naughty Dog fan as well, I always have been. First game is terrific. I know some people tend to describe it maybe as a walking simulator, which I completely disagree. I don't think it's a walking simulator at all. Some people like to describe it as that, but the way it told its story and the story it told was... It kept me gripped. I keep saying edge of your seat. It kept me gripped from beginning to end. I absolutely adore The Last of Us. I've played it probably 5 to 10 times through to completion. I completed it on Grounded at least once, maybe twice. I started it on stream and then never went back to it on Grounded, but that is the way to play it, sort of, because it kind of lines the gameplay up. The gameplay becomes kind of bleak, like the world you're inhabiting post-pandemic or in post-outbreak. And I loved the multiplayer on the first Last of Us. It's a real shame they didn't bring that back with the Part 1 kind of remake or remaster, whatever you'd call it, because the multiplayer on The Last of Us was actually awesome. I loved multiplayer Last of Us. Played hundreds of hours of it, I would imagine. The Last of Us 2, I really enjoyed. I don't get any of the story criticism. I really liked the story. I think there was some really embarrassing discourse around The Last of Us 2. Still embarrassing to this day. I thought the story was very good. I didn't like the level of violence, and I'm not a prude when it comes to that kind of thing. I love a bit, like I said, Resident Evil is one of my favourite games. Silent Hill and the like. I have nothing against violence in games. When it came to The Last of Us 2, though, it began to feel mean-spirited. It began to feel to me at points like there was violence that didn't need to be there. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's part of the whole kind of that idea of revenge and the pointlessness of revenge and things, and maybe having all that violence was maybe trying to illustrate the level of bloodshed that comes with not being able to give up on getting revenge, you know. Maybe that's what it is. I'd have to look into it further. But for me, it was a draining, and again, maybe this it being draining and exhausting was something that was meant to come with the game. But for me, I struggled to play it for long stretches because it was almost too much. It was almost too gratuitous. I don't know if I've used the phrase mean-spirited, but it almost felt mean-spirited at times. Can't wait for the next one, though. Love the TV series as well. Just watch the TV series if you haven't. It's really good. The Bill and Frank episode is one of the best episodes of television ever made. Uncharted for me is a good. Started out getting the first Uncharted at launch on the PlayStation 3 because I'd heard the graphics were amazing and I loved Naughty Dog, and man, were the graphics great at the time. Doesn't look that great, doesn't play that great nowadays compared to the later entries, but I loved Uncharted 1, you know, going into the submarine, hanging off the side of a cliff, and I think that's maybe where it gets a bit sci-fi after that point with the zombies. Really enjoyed it. It was basically a modern Indiana Jones game, which is something I'd always wanted. I know there had been Indiana Jones games. There was one on the Xbox, which was a third-person game, and obviously there were a couple of point-and-click games back in the day, adventure games back in the day as well. But the Uncharted felt like the Indiana Jones game I always wanted. I thought Nolan North was terrific, especially, and I don't know who played Sully off the top of my head, his name, I can't remember it. The characters are brilliant. It's something Naughty Dog has always done as really well, as with The Last of Us. And then Uncharted 2 was a 10 out of 10. Uncharted 3 kind of dropped the ball a little bit, but was still a passable to good entry for the series. And I loved Uncharted 4. Haven't played The Lost Legacy, I think. Haven't played that yet. I've been saving it for a rainy day because I kind of don't want the series to end. But I thought it ended beautifully in 4. In terms of the story of Nathan Drake. So yeah, I love Uncharted. Will definitely probably replay those games at some point in the future. Crash Bandicoot is another good series for me. I grew up playing Crash Bandicoot 1, 2 and 3. Crash Bandicoot 2 is... Well, Crash Bandicoot 2 and 3 were actually both exemplary platformers. I have very strong memories of sitting down at Christmas. I think Crash Bandicoot 2 might have been the first game I got for my PlayStation, maybe. I have very strong memories of sitting down at Christmas. All I wanted to do was just play the level where you ran away from the polar bear, and then when you got on a little polar bear to run away from the bigger polar bear. It was just the best. It was the best. And then Crash 3 Warped was also really, really good. I played a bit of the next one that came, Wrath of Cortex, maybe on the PlayStation 2, but that was when I was kind of losing interest a little bit. It was still really good, but from then on I kind of lost interest, and it's just since then not really grabbed me so much. I took a passing interest in 4 as well, and I will probably play 4 at some point, but yeah, at this stage it's a good for me. I remain interested in the series, but not as much as I used to be. SimCity is right down at the bottom for me. I played SimCity 2001, I think, and that was enough SimCity for me. Haven't got the patience for it. It's just not my... like city builders like that and City Skylines, they're just not my bag. Like, I'm not saying they're bad games again, they're just not really my thing. FIFA is a trash series for me, and there is a reason for this, and it's not because I think FIFA is a bad game to actually play. Back in the day, we grew up playing International Superstar Soccer and then Pro Evolution Soccer. Those were the games that I played throughout my childhood, into school, into kind of senior school and university. And then FIFA started coming back around kind of, you know, the late noughties, maybe into the 2010s. I got obsessed with FIFA for a while, around kind of FIFA 12, 13, 14, 15. Played a lot of FIFA around then. The reason I don't like it is because I think the predatory practices within the game are appalling, genuinely appalling, and I'm amazed they haven't been reined in more than they have. They are designed to get children to spend money on what is almost gambling, and I mean, this is actually a accusation that could be levelled at Counter-Strike, I suppose, as well. But Counter-Strike is a bit more of an adult game, but that also has cases and things, which it is gambling, let's be honest, it's gambling. FIFA is the same, the absurd monetisation of it is ridiculous, and the game hasn't changed that much for a long time. It changes here and there every year. I hate what it's become. Age of Empires is a mid for me. I loved Age of Empires 2. Age of Empires 2 was the first online game I ever played. It was Age of Empires 2, Age of Kings. It was through MSN Gaming Zone at the time. I played in a clan. We were the Slayer clan, because all the clans back then were 14 or 15, or a lot of them were 14 or 15, not even that, like 10-year-olds who thought having Slayer before your name was really cool. So I was in a clan called Slayer on MSN Gaming Zone, and my name at the time was Fat Cat, I think. Not because I wanted to pretend to be rich, but because the idea of a really large cat was hilarious to me. I don't know why now. That was 26 years ago. I don't know why it was so funny, but at the time it was. But I loved Age of Empires 2. I can still remember all the music like it was yesterday. I liked loading up the map with cars, using the cheat and driving around and shooting stuff. After that, I haven't taken such an interest in it, but again, I keep an eye out for it. This is a tough one for me. I think it goes in good. International Superstar Soccer, especially ISS 98, which is one of the greatest football games ever made. And then Pro Evolution Soccer up to maybe kind of 2008, 2009. That was the football series. It was the best football series to play. It was all we played at university. FIFA was just not a thing. But since then, it's really dropped off, and I don't even know what's going on with eFootball these days. I know they released it, and I believe it's maybe free, but it will take a lot to get people back from FIFA now. I'm not sure there'll ever be a swing back like there was from Konami to EA. I'm not sure it's going to ever swing back the other way like it did, you know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, unfortunately. So yeah, it's a good series for me, but that's based on, again, past triumphs. Need for Speed is not good for me. I used to like the Underground series back in the day, but beyond that, I haven't really played them. I think, you know, they're very much the Fast and Furious of video game racers in terms of if you're really into kind of cars and fast cars and cool looking cars, you're going to really like the series. And the Hot Pursuits, I think I played a little bit and enjoyed, but yeah, never really been that interested in Need for Speed, to be perfectly honest. Batman is good. If it was based entirely off Arkham Asylum, it would be very good. But Arkham Asylum was my favourite Batman. I really loved Arkham Asylum. I thought City was a very entertaining game, but I didn't like the openness of the world, and I didn't like it again with Night and the introduction of the Batmobile. They're all fantastically well-made games. Oh, and I never played Origins because I was just done with the series by that point. But Arkham Asylum especially, where it was a more compact experience, I thought it was just such a confident attempt at bringing a superhero game into the modern era in a way that maybe seems like something that's not so special now. You know, we've had like the Spider-Mans and the like now, which have also done it. But at the time, superhero games were generally pretty rubbish. I mean, if any of you ever remember Superman 64, which doesn't get talked about a lot these days, but man alive. And there were some good Spider-Man games on the PlayStation, I suppose. But Arkham Asylum, with its combat system, which obviously every game under the sun then copied, it did look a bit insane sometimes when you'd press punch at an enemy that was halfway across the screen and you just kind of fly across. It was a little bit ridiculous, but it was intensely playable. Love the series, but yeah, I'm not that fussed. Injustice I've never given a go. Midnight Club I've never really played. Manhunt not good. I played them both. I believe there's 2. If there's more, I apologise. I played both the Manhunts and I thought they were okay, but nothing special. I might play it if there was a 3rd or whatever the newest one would be, but not that fussed. Gran Turismo is mid. I still have a go on the Gran Turismos when they come out. I haven't played the most recent one, whichever number that is, but I love Gran Turismo 1, 2 and 3 especially were the big ones for me. I remember playing Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec, blasting around the track with Feeder playing, when, you know, I was really into that kind of indie music at the time, that kind of, I guess you describe it as Britpop maybe, although don't hate me if I've got that wrong as well. Loved it. In recent times, less interested, but still a great series for me. I'm putting this trio of titles in very good rather than masterpiece, just because I thought The Last Guardian was a letdown for what I hoped. I don't think Eco is as good as Shadow of the Colossus either. I think Eco, for a game that is predominantly an escort mission, it's brilliant, because you'd think, I hate escort missions in games, and you'd think a game that is mostly an escort mission would be terrible, but it's not. It's very, very well made. Shadow of the Colossus is a classic. It's another one of those games that I think everyone should play. Ideally, I would say play the original, but the PlayStation 4 version with the fancy graphics, which I think was done by Bluepoint, who are a brilliant developer, is worth playing too. Yeah, it's a very, very good series. I don't think it quite reaches Masterpiece because of The Last Guardian, which I would only say is a 7 or 8 out of 10. 7, probably. BioShock is another very good for me. BioShock 1 is in my top 10 games of all time. I absolutely adore it. BioShock 2 is a very competent sequel, which in many ways is a much more fun game to actually play than the original BioShock. Just having your gun and plasmid equipped and out at the same time, one in each hand, makes a massive difference. Minerva's Den, which I've just done a video on and I mentioned earlier, is one of the best pieces of downloadable content of all time. Unfortunately, BioShock Infinite spoiled what should have been one of the best years in gaming for me. 2013, I believe, or was it 2015? Whichever year it was. It must have been 2013, right? Because there were 3 games I was losing sleep over with excitement, which was The Last of Us, Grand Theft Auto 5, and BioShock Infinite. The Last of Us and Grand Theft Auto 5 completely lived up to expectations. Both amazing. BioShock Infinite came out around my birthday. I think I even took a day off with one of my mates to play it on my birthday. That might be a lie. I might have just played it the day it came out. I can't remember. But the story was okay. The world of Columbia was awesome. The gameplay was shocking. I mean, it was completely serviceable. It's not a bad game. It just felt so linear and stripped back, and it just lacked some of the soul for me. Obviously not helped by the fact it had those 2 gameplay trailers which looked absolutely extraordinary, and, you know, granted, I probably did have in my head a bit at the time that wasn't going to work on consoles, but just some of the mystery that those 2 games had was lacking for me. Those 2 trailers was lacking for me. The gameplay was severely lacking compared to those. I wouldn't have minded if Infinite was more linear but was really good. It would have been fine, but it's just, I don't find it that fun to play, and I think the story it's got some plot holes. So yeah, BioShock is very good. I will play BioShock 4. I know they've got that codename Parkside or whatever it's meant to be, and there's been rumours about maybe it's below the ice in the Antarctic or something. I'll play that the day it comes out, but it's not quite a masterpiece series because of Infinite, unfortunately, for me. Stalker I'll put mid. I really enjoyed Shadow of Chernobyl. My wife always tells me off for pronouncing it, whichever one of those is the correct one. I always pick the other one, and then I get worried, and so I'm just taking my bets here. I played the first Stalker and I really enjoyed it. It's a very hard game at times, but I really liked it. I didn't play Call of Pripyat or whatever the other one was called, but I know they've got Stalker 2 coming out, and Stalker 2 I will play at launch, just because I think it's been long enough now with the Stalker series that I want to give it another go. But yeah, mid I think is about fair. Metro I'm going to go for above average. I liked Metro... What was the first one called? Metro... I can't remember what the first Metro was called. Metro 2033? Whatever the first Metro was called. I really liked the first Metro, albeit my PC could barely handle it, so I played it at a room temperature frame rate, if that. Room temperature frame rate is actually probably too high. I played it at about 30 frames a second, maybe less, and it was a tough play. But I really enjoyed some of the stuff about it, like being able to, you know, bullets being a currency and things like that. Last Light I thought was okay, and then I've been playing Metro Exodus, although I'm only maybe a third to a halfway through it. I've been playing Metro Exodus based off a few viewer recommendations, and I have been recording footage so that maybe I can write about it at some point, and I've been really enjoying myself. I really like open worlds which are just like smaller, more compact open worlds, which is something Exodus does. So yeah, I liked the series, and I will continue to play the series based on Exodus because I think that was better than Last Light. Spyro is probably below average for me at this point. I like Crash Bandicoot. I played Spyro 1, 2 and 3 on the original PlayStation, and then actually, you know what, I'm going to go... Not good for me. I played them on the original PlayStation, but I pretty much got zero interest in Spyro these days. I know there's the remastered collection like they did with Crash Bandicoot Trilogy as well, and I probably will give those a go at some point, but Spyro at this point I've got pretty much no interest in. Guitar Hero is trash, which I feel is a tough place to put Guitar Hero, because I did have Guitar Hero. I had Guitar Hero 3, Legends of Rock, I believe was the subtitle, and we played it a bit at university, but to be honest, once we played it for maybe a week or two, the novelty was pretty much gone, and I've never taken any interest in it since, and I won't take any interest in it since. So yeah, I guess trash tier for me. Warcraft I'd never really played. Interestingly, I've never followed Warcraft. I've never played Warcraft particularly, but I did actually follow it. I remember I used to watch competitive Warcraft 3 back in the day. I believe one of the top players was called Grubby. I remember liking the player Grubby, I think his name was. So I did actually used to watch a bit of Warcraft 3 competitive, which went on for a number of years. But yeah, I've never really played it. Titanfall is another very good series for me. I don't think it can quite go masterpiece, just because I liked the first Titanfall. I liked it. I played it online for a bit, but I had it's really hard for shooters for me, because there are certain games that I just am always going to play, which is Counter-Strike and is Halo. If I'm playing, and maybe Overwatch sometimes, because of those games, something has to be really, really good as a shooter in order to tempt me away for anything more than a couple of hours. And actually, Titanfall 2 did tempt me away for more than a couple of hours, but ultimately it never really grabbed me like enough to take me away from my staples. Titanfall 2 is one of the best FPS games ever made. If you follow my channel, you'll know my opinions on Titanfall 2. I think Effect and Cause, the run of Into the Abyss, Effect and Cause and the Beacon especially, is a spectacular run of 3 of the best levels in FPS gaming. I think it is short but sweet in all the right ways. I think it's hard not to be entertained over that 4 or 5, not to be incredibly entertained over the 4 to 5 hours it goes on for. I think the multiplayer is really, really fun as well, although again, the reason I have played less of that, I have played quite a lot of Titanfall 2 multiplayer, but the reason I played less is because, again, it's really a reaction shooter, and my reactions are dulling with age, so I forget what I'm doing sometimes, forget what button to press to do what, or I just can't think quick enough. But Titanfall 2, I would tell everybody, you have to go and play Titanfall 2. It's got a great story. It's really about the relationship between BT and Cooper. It's really entertaining. It plays brilliantly. It's consistently creative. I really don't have anything bad to say about it. And I hope we get Titanfall 3 sometime. I really do. Unreal Tournament, I'm going to go as not good. I really only ever got into Unreal Tournament 99 around the same time I was playing a lot of Quake 3. And I did love Unreal Tournament 99. I used to just put however many bots, the max amount of bots you could put on a map, and then just run around blasting things and then seeing how high I could raise the difficulty and still come out on top. That's really all I've played. Oh, I did play a bit of Unreal Championship, I think it was called, and maybe Unreal Championship 2 on, pardon me, the Xbox, if that was the name of those 2 games, because you could play them split screen and have all the bots. So I did play a bit of that, but yeah, Unreal Tournament, I've got no interest in the present. Gears of War, no, it is a good. Gears of War, the original trilogy, I loved. Gears of War 2 and 3, I loved. I thought they were all excellent. Gears of War especially, obviously, continued to popularise the third-person genre after Resident Evil 4 had really given it its launch. Gears of War brought in cover, and, I think it should be thought of as a trend-setting title. Judgment, I haven't really played. 4 I tried to play and couldn't get into. 5 I tried to play and couldn't get into. I'm just not that interested in the series anymore. I don't feel like it's got that much to offer that I haven't seen in Gears of War 1, 2 and 3. I'd like to see it be successful because I think it's a great franchise, but I think it needs to come back with a real bang next time it does. I don't know what that is, but it needs to be something big. But if it does, I will be right on board. Metal Gear Solid is a masterpiece franchise for me. I talked earlier about games that have completely lived up to my high expectations, and Metal Gear Solid, the original Metal Gear Solid, is one of those games. My mum must have been losing her mind sitting in the car with me, because I would sit there reading whatever magazine articles were in official PlayStation magazine, Games Master magazine and similar, just rabbiting away to my mother about Metal Gear Solid and how you had to hide from guards and sneak around, and when you leant against a wall the camera angle would change. I would just rabbit on and on at her, the poor woman. But then it came out and it completely, I remember getting the demo and just that skyrocketed to be, I barely sleep in the week leading up to Metal Gear. I could barely sleep. And it came out in 1999, and it ushered in, I think, a new level of cinematography for video games, which I don't think was present in video games at the time. You could look at a screenshot of Metal Gear Solid and look at a screenshot of, say, Resident Evil, and you think, well, they both look pretty cinematic. But the level of professionalism, the quality of voice acting, and just some of the innovations in the gameplay as well, it just really was the complete package. In terms of, it felt filmic. It felt like playing an espionage action film in a way I don't think any other video game had managed to do at the time. It's a 11 out of 10. And also it just had some great kind of little innovations. You know, looking on the back of the box for Meryl's codec frequency, Psycho Mantis being able to read your memory card, the sniper fight with Sniper Wolf in the snow, and it was just wonderful. Having to heat up the key card towards the end. I've been talking a lot about Metal Gear Solid, and I realise there's other games in the series. 2, also brilliant, although I didn't like the big shell as much, but I think the story is ahead of its time in terms of what it talks about, the themes it covers. 3, probably a better game than 2 in terms of actually playing it, but I prefer the story in 2. 4 and 5 are a bit more of a letdown. 4, I need to go back and play again, really. I only played it kind of 1.5 times back in the day. I got it at launch and sat down and played it for an entire day. I think more than a day. I think I sat there for about 15 hours playing it once the ridiculous installs were done for each chapter. And once I'd got through the mental cutscenes, which were like, surely there were cutscenes in that game that were over an hour. I don't know. But I was a bit more let down by 4. It just felt like it jumped all over the place too much. You kept jumping from location to location. It didn't feel as cohesive. And then 5 felt cohesive, but it didn't really feel finished in a lot of ways, and I'm not sure the open world particularly helped it. What I would have liked to have seen was something more in the mould of Ground Zeroes, which obviously came out beforehand. I would have liked 5 to have been like that, where maybe it was like maybe 3 to 5 maps the size of Ground Zeroes that were just small but densely packed with stuff to do and little side objectives to complete and things. 4 or 5 of them would have been great, as opposed to just these massive open areas that didn't really offer a whole lot. I was not interested in the base building and capturing troops to level up your base and things. So yeah, Ground Zeroes extended out across lots of areas I think would have been amazing for 5. It was a sad way to end the franchise, because I think it could have been a lot more, but in general the series is a masterpiece for me. I think even with 5, even with 4, which I don't like as much, it's continually innovative in ways that surprise me, and I think it deserves to be there. Darkstalkers is a franchise I've never really played. StarCraft, I'm going to put as not good. I played some StarCraft Brood War back in the day. I played quite a bit of StarCraft Brood War, but I was awful at it, so eventually I think I spent about 20-30 hours on it, just because I'd seen it. As you've probably gathered by now, I'm quite into professional esports. I like watching it, and I'm really interested in the culture across a lot of games. So I tried getting into StarCraft, because obviously in Korea it was on television. In Korea it was like a national sport. It was for a long time. Not so much anymore. Never really played StarCraft 2 again, watched it professionally, and you know, people are still playing StarCraft professionally to this day. Maybe I'd play a new one. Rainbow Six is trash, only because I already have Counter-Strike, and Rainbow Six sort of looks like Counter-Strike, and I already have Counter-Strike for my tactical online shooter needs. It's nothing against Rainbow Six. Actually, because I'm thinking of one game, I'm going to put it not good. I did like Rainbow Six, the tactical single-player shooter on the computer back in the day. The Rainbow Six Vegas games on Xbox 360 are also really fun as well, with the cover system, where you had to hold down, was it you held down a button and then used the stick to peek out? I think they controlled really well, and having the fights in the casinos and stuff. And actually, saying that, I played it a lot online as well because it was one of the first really popular online shooters, the the original Rainbow Six Vegas. So yeah, actually not good is probably a fair place to put it. I've little interest in the series nowadays, but I've had a lot of fun with it in the past. Assassin's Creed is mid for me. I think 1 was a good game, but you know, you'd never go back and play 1 now. 2 is one of the best sequels again ever made. I think it took everything that the first game had and just expanded on it in all the right ways. And that's from that point onwards they just started drawing the whole thing out. I mean, I liked Brotherhood. I didn't mind Revelations either. I thought they were both decent games. I haven't got round to playing Origins, Odyssey, or whatever the most recent one is called that has completely slipped my mind for some reason. Assassin's Creed Vikings, whatever it's called, the newest one. It's annoying me that I can't think of what it's called. I just don't have the time to play them at the moment. I would like to go and play them more. I think I did try Origins, but it's a series I have a middling interest in. I kind of had an interest in Mirage because I know it went back to the kind of older style. Oh, and Black Flag is one of the best games ever made, by the way. Black Flag is amazing. 3 I didn't like. Black Flag was amazing. But yeah, Mirage I heard was kind of middling, so I never got round to playing it. I probably won't. Watch Dogs is probably horrible. I played the first Watch Dogs and I thought it had a gimmick which was enjoyable to begin with, but is not particularly deep. Never got round to playing 2. Played a bit of Legion because I was interested in as to whether I could drive to the flat I lived in at the time in Brixton. You couldn't, unfortunately, but you could drive past the Ritzy Cinema in Brixton, so that was cool, and you could drive past the tube station. So I liked it for that, but yeah, it's an okay series. Dishonored for me is very good. I think Dishonored 1 is good. I think Dishonored 2 is even better. A lot of people prefer the first. I prefer the second. Lady Boyle's Party, I can't remember the exact name of the level in the first one, and also A Crack in the Slab and The Clockwork Mansion in the second are 3 amazing first-person shooter, if you can call it FPS levels, ImSim levels, I guess you'd call them. They're brilliant. I've covered 2 out of those 3 in detail on my channel before. I love the aesthetic of the series. I love the story. I love everything about it. And they've also got cracking DLC as well. I also realise there's a huge amount of games I've been talking for a while already, so I'm going to try and hurry myself up a bit. Bravely Default I never really played. Left 4 Dead, very good. I loved Left 4 Dead 1 and 2. Modding them has always been really interesting to me as well. You know, I've played Left 4 Dead 2, I think it was, where you're playing the Battle of Helm's Deep, except it's Left 4 Dead and it's got zombies. I love what modders have been able to do with those games, and they're just great fun to play. I could jump into Left 4 Dead now, I could jump into it tomorrow, I could jump into it in 5 years' time. I'm always going to have a great time with Left 4 Dead. They're just fun. They're the definition of fun. Kingdom Hearts is a horrible for me. I played the first Kingdom Hearts to completion. I've wanted to get back into the series since, but I've heard mixed things about the third one, and then I had a look online and all the articles were saying that I needed to play about 4 other side games that were on portable consoles and all sorts if I wanted to actually understand what was going on. And I feel strongly that the mainline numbered games in your series, you should be able to understand what is happening from those 3 games. You shouldn't need side content. And I might be completely wrong in my assessment of this. This is just what I've read and heard from multiple people. But people were saying you need to play X, Y, and Z if you want to play 3, if you want to play 2. And I'm just not down for that. So yeah, my opinion of Kingdom Hearts isn't amazing. Madden NFL, I play occasionally with mates, but it's not really my bag. NBA 2K, I don't play. I'm going to call this all of the WF games. I'm going to put it just above the lowest rung. I used to love WWF SmackDown back in the day, SmackDown 1 and 2 especially. Big fan. I don't know if any of you remember, the characters used to just kind of walk on the spot with their Titantron video playing in the background. Tables and ladders and chairs, I believe, were only introduced in the second SmackDown game on PlayStation, and I was so excited to be able to put 3 people through tables, do a 3D through a table as the Dudley Boys and all that kind of thing. Loved those games. I kind of went off wrestling maybe when I got to kind of 13, 14, so the early noughties, and I have no interest in it nowadays, which is why it's so low down, but I had a good time with those 2 games. If they ever remastered those 2 games, for example, I would be on it in an instant. beyond playing it a couple of times on the Mega Drive, I've never played the NHL games, never played the show. UFC, probably just above horrible. I'm a big fan of the UFC. I watch all of the UFC events. I absolutely adore the sport. I love UFC. I love boxing. Again, it's a fighting game that I take a little bit of interest in. I bought the first... When they started doing them a bit more professionally during the Xbox 360 lifespan, because I know there've been games before. I think there was even a UFC game on the Dreamcast back in the day. But when they first came back as a kind of really professionally made series, when they were really starting to take it seriously, I got the first one on the Xbox 360. Was it just called UFC 2009 or whatever it was called at the time? But my interest has waned since then. Although I do like watching people play them online. I do like watching people fight against each other at a high level on them. So there's some interest, I guess. Inazuma 11, which I'm going to go ahead and assume is also known as Winning 11, which I believe is like a football role-playing game I've never played, but I've heard of. Arma, I've never played. Ghosts and Goblins, I have played the original, maybe. Ghouls and Goblins, is that a sequel or is that the original? Ghosts and Goblins is maybe the original, and then there's Ghouls and Goblins, or maybe Ghouls and Goblins doesn't even exist and I'm completely making it up. But I played it back in the day just to try it out because it was so hard. And then there was a 3D version actually that maybe I played. I don't know if that was actually part of the series or if that was made by another developer. But yeah, I haven't really got that much time for it. The Sly games, I played the original and I haven't gone back to them. I preferred Ratchet and Clank and Jak and Daxter. Not got much to say on these. Banjo-Kazooie is mid for me. Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie were in the same mold as Donkey Kong 64. They were heavy collect 'em ups that just felt like you were collecting a million things, but at the same time they were very playable games. But I think having played Yooka-Laylee, which was obviously meant to be a kind of spiritual successor, hence the name Yooka-Laylee, Banjo-Kazooie, Yooka-Laylee. They're meant to be a spiritual successor, but having played that, it made me question how much I liked the older games, so I went back and played them, and they were fine. They were good for what they were at the time, but they don't really stand up in the present day. I really liked Nuts and Bolts, which came out on the 360. I thought that was a tremendous game that maybe was underrated. Was it underrated? I felt like it was underrated. But yeah, not that interested. Donkey Kong, I'm going to put it below average. Obviously, the original is a classic. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. I was going to say I thought Donkey Kong 64 was fine, but then we're forgetting about Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong Country 2, and maybe there were one or two other games. They were brilliant. I actually only played them right towards the end of the SNES's life cycle, as the PlayStation and the N64 and things coming out, and the only reason I'd avoided them was because they looked really slow and cumbersome. And then I went and played them and I blown away. The graphics especially fantastic. The series kind of lost in I started to not really look at the series much as it kind of continued on, but then someone on YouTube told me to go back and play the Wii games. Is it Tropical Freeze? Maybe I'm getting the name wrong there. But I played one of those that came out on the Wii, and as a person who wishes there were more modern platformers, I feel a bit bad for not playing them at the time, because, you know, you've got to buy games you like to encourage developers to make them, because they were real good. Real good. So yeah, Donkey Kong, I've got time for it. I'm going to put Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic in good. I think the first game is a very good, borderline masterpiece. The second game was very rushed and unfinished, but actually now if you go back and play it, where it's been modded and a lot of it has been fixed, it's really good. But at the time I played it, it felt rushed. And it was rushed. I think it was made in like a year, maybe? But it's a brilliant... You know what? I am going to bump it up to very good. I actually feel like it's doing a disservice to put it with... I was looking at it alongside kind of Call of Duty and Medal of Honor and Battlefield and things. No, both games are still... The first one is close to perfect. The second one is still very good. And if they make another one, I'll be there day one. Mountain Blade, never played. Rhymes. Battlefront, above average. I liked the Battlefront games back in the day, and I was really hoping the collection that's just come out would be something that I could jump straight into, but now I've got to wait because it sounds like it's an absolute mess, so I will wait until it's fixed. But once it's fixed, I will be on that, and I'm sure I will waste hours of my life playing it over and over again. I thought the two more recent ones developed by EA were good. I only played the first one, admittedly, a lot. And then the second one had all those issues with people complaining about monetization, so I didn't try that when it came out. And then actually I've heard it's been fixed now, so but I feel like I've just missed the moment with it a little bit. I like it. It's a good series. Total War, never really played. I played a bit of Rome back in the day, but beyond that, what's that? Ace Combat. I'm going to put it as horrible. I've been told by a couple of people to play maybe Ace Combat 6, but it's not a series that's ever really piqued my interest particularly, so I'm going to put that in horrible. Animal Crossing, not for me at all. I just like The Sims or similar, but even worse, I just don't have any interest in it. Fire Emblem, I've never really played. God of War is a very good. I was thinking good for a second there, but I think God of War's got to be very good. God of War 1 and 2 especially. Well, God of War 1, 2 and 3, they're all classics. The reboot is amazing. I think what they did, it obviously feels, maybe people might disagree with me, but the combat in the reboot felt slower to me, but in a good way. They actually play pretty differently from God of War 1, 2 and 3. I haven't played some of the spin-offs, Chainers of Olympus and the like. But I remember God of War and God of War 2 came out towards the end of the PlayStation 2's life cycle. Kind of came out of nowhere, because I'd kind of thought, oh, there's nothing going to come out on the PlayStation 2 now that takes my interest. And then they just kind of appeared out of nowhere, especially the first one, and were absolutely amazing. Yeah, great series. Dragon Ball Z, no. No. Naruto, no. Naruto, no. Klonoa, don't know how to pronounce it. Not good. I remember playing the first one, assuming I am thinking of the right title, where it's the little kind of dog-looking thing with the flappy ears, cat dog-looking thing. I played the first one through to completion on the PlayStation, and I took a passing interest in the second one, but more of that was based off people going on about how rare the original was to own. And I think the second one came out on the PlayStation, but I only played the demo. Yeah, not got much else to say about that. Blaze Blue, Fatal Fury, don't really know. Final Fight, probably below average, and I'm going to put Streets of Rage into above average. Final Fight I really like, and I really like Streets of Rage, but Streets of Rage always vibed with me a little better. I really liked the kind of, for those of you who were watching movies in the 80s, that kind of punky kind of, I don't know how to describe the aesthetic, you know, like the kind of the Warriors, and it had that kind of street kind of punky aesthetic. I really liked that. I really liked Streets of Rage. I played a lot of Streets of Rage, and actually one of the first videos I did on my YouTube channel was Streets of Rage 4, and that was a really nice comeback for the series. So yeah, I've got a lot of time for kind of scrolling beat-em-ups. Art of Fighting I've never really played. Burnout, I'm going to put Burnout in good. Burnout 1 and 2 I played predominantly with a friend because he was really into them, and I liked them well enough. Burnout 3, Takedown, I was obsessed with for a time. Driving down the road, whizzing down the road, smashing cars into barriers, listening to Orpheus by Ash was an absolute dream for me. I think half the time I only listened to that track while I was playing. Burnout 4, Revenge, I believe it was called, I also enjoyed, although it wasn't as good as Burnout 3 for me. And then Burnout Paradise, I was desperate to hate as it came to launch, because all I wanted was more of, like, you know, doing races around track Burnout. I hated the idea of it being in a city. The aesthetic looked a bit more grey and uninteresting to me. It looked like it lacked colour. I just wanted to hate everything about it. And then I got Burnout Paradise, and one Christmas I just sat down and I played it and I played it and I played it, and I think I ended up getting the Platinum Trophy on the PlayStation 3 for Burnout Paradise. I still don't know if I love it, or whether it was there at a time where I had enough time to play it and it just filled a need at the time, filled a gaming hole. I don't know. But what I will say is the party add-on was something my friends and I spent hours playing at university. We still occasionally play a little bit of Burnout Party. I think it's an awesome multiplayer mode. But yeah, Burnout's great. Virtua Fighter, going to put quite low down for me. I played Virtua Fighter 3 for a little bit. I quite enjoyed, you could start your own character and you had to kind of train him up and you could pick your moves and things. And it was a bit more technical, which I enjoyed at first, compared to maybe, say, your Tekkens and things that were out around the same time. But yeah, not so much in the present. Tekken is a good... For me, Tekken 3 was one of the best fighting games ever made. And then there was a lull. And then I think with Tekken maybe 6 and Tekken 7 and things, it's kind of come back into the fold. Tekken 7, is it that's out right now? Or is it Tekken 8? Maybe it's Tekken 8 that's out right now. I think it's Tekken 8 I've been playing. Don't quote me on that. I should remember. I was playing it like 2 days ago. Really, 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 really having a lot of fun with it. I will lose interest within a month. Maybe a week, even. But yeah, I got a lot of time for Tekken. I will always give Tekken a go. Star Fox is down on the list for me. I've never been that passionate about Star Fox. I played a bit of Star Fox back in the day. I played a bit of Lilac Wars. I think I finished Lilac Wars on the N64. I think maybe that was called Star Fox in other regions in the UK, or maybe in the UK at least. Maybe in the EU it was called Lilac Wars. But yeah, I'm not waiting with bated breath. Same with F-Zero. I've definitely spent the requisite time. I don't know if you can necessarily complete an F-Zero per se, but I've spent the requisite amount of time playing F-Zero in the past. It's just not really one I'm particularly interested in. Silent Hill is a masterpiece series for me. 1, 2 and 3 are 3 of my favourite survival horror games of all time. 2 is one of my top 5 greatest games of all time. The story of James and his wife, his missing, deceased wife, Mary. It's so stunning. It's so stunning. And I'm so terrified of what they're going to do with the remake. I'm so terrified of what Bloober Team are going to do with the remake. Because I like Bloober Team, but they've not done anything close. I don't think you need to have created a game to the standard of Silent Hill 2 to remake Silent Hill 2, but I think you needed to have demonstrated like a level not far below it, and I don't think Bloober Team has demonstrated a level I think they've demonstrated a level around middling. I don't think they've gone any higher... Oh, pardon. Sorry, I almost knocked my mic down. I don't think they've gone any higher than that. And look, Silent Hill has had some missteps as well, right? There's Silent Hill Homecoming and... Geez, what was the one after Homecoming called? I can't even remember. But the 2 that came out on the Xbox 360, Silent Hill Homecoming, and the other one about the dude escaping prison, I think? Or was that Homecoming? No, Homecoming was Murphy, wasn't it? Who came back from war. And then the other one, that for some reason I've completely forgotten the name of, was the dude escaping from prison. Might be wrong on that. They were fine. They were fine games. They were okay. Shoving Pyramid Head into Homecoming really annoyed me because he's not meant to be just shoved into Silent Hill. But then there was PT, which I kind of consider part of the Silent Hill universe, even if it isn't. And PT was probably my favourite game released for like the PS4, Xbox One, Switch generation. I don't know what to say about PT other than it's one of the scariest, perhaps the scariest thing I've ever played. I am a huge horror fan, films and video games, and I could barely get through Silent Hill the first time I played it. I played it with a friend even. We were sitting in the room and I was so utterly petrified by that game. Yeah, I'm really, really hoping Silent Hill can return to form because it's one of the best series, I think. The second best horror series behind Resident Evil. Dino Crisis is a good for me. Dino Crisis 3 is dinosaurs in space, and I thought Dino Crisis 3 Dinosaurs in Space sounded like it was going to be amazing because Dino Crisis 2 was more action orientated, and so I was like, okay, dinosaurs in space, take the Dino Crisis 2 action, bring it into space, that'll be cool. Shockingly bad game. Dino Crisis 2, not what I wanted after the original Dino Crisis, but actually turned out to be brilliant in its own right. It's a much more action focused game. But it works really well. There's tons of weapons, you're upgrading stuff. I haven't played it in a long time, can't remember all the details. If I seem to remember correctly, maybe it really lent into the time travelling, which I think might have been introduced during the original Dino Crisis. But I remember there being a lot of time travel-y stuff in Dino Crisis 2, which was a bit stupid, but it was a blast to play, intensely playable. The original Dino Crisis is essentially Resident Evil with dinosaurs, and I loved it. There's a bit where a T-Rex smashes his head through a window, which I forever remember as one of the moments I've been most frightened by a video game. What was really interesting about Dino Crisis, beyond being able to find the Umbrella logo on some boxes, which I think was just an Easter egg, was it actually used a 3D camera. So no Resident Evil game on the PlayStation apart from, I guess, if you count Survivor, that was 3D. But none of the mainline Resident Evil games, so 1, 2, 3 on the PlayStation, they all used pre-rendered backgrounds and fixed camera angles. So they weren't fully 3D games. The character models were 3D, the monsters were 3D, and maybe some objects in the environment, but they weren't fully 3D titles, which meant the camera couldn't move. Silent Hill was. So if you remember at the start of Silent Hill, you can, when you run down the alley, the camera starts like swinging around and things, and it just makes the scene so much more frightening. And actually Dino Crisis was 3D. That was the one that was 3D from all of Capcom's kind of survival horror efforts, and it really added to the game, I thought. I really like the original Dino Crisis. I have it ready to play, and I've been meaning to play it, and I hopefully will go back and play it soon. Duke Nukem for me is just a trash series. I played Duke Nukem when it was a platformer. I don't know if any of you remember, but hopefully some of you do. Duke Nukem was a platformer before it kind of really maybe had its breakout with Duke Nukem 3D. And I never thought it was that funny, you know, all that kick-ass, chew bubblegum stuff. I don't know, even when I was a kid, when you think I'd be into it, I was never that enamoured by it. I never thought the games were that good. I didn't like the humour. Not my bag. Actually, I'll tell you what, that's unfair. I'm going to put it one up, because when we're talking about bad humour, Postal is the dictionary definition of bad humour. It is just... And I wonder now whether I should have put the other games next to Postal above it, and Postal should have its own rank. Let's have a do-over here and say, if I started this list again and I knew Postal was on it, I would put Postal at the bottom with everything else above it. Postal 1 is a weird kind of isometric game. It's just controversial and not particularly entertaining. Postal 2, I played with friends, and it was really funny when we were like 13, because you could Wii on things and use a cat as a silencer. But we only played it to do that stuff and then got bored after an hour and went on to other things. When I first started my YouTube channel, I've privated the videos now because they don't quite fit with my current tone, I suppose, for what I'm trying to do with the YouTube. Not the way I was talking or speaking or looked at the games, but the game itself I'm talking about. I actually went back and played all of Postal 2 to completion, and my goodness, it was hard to get through. It is just utter dross. It really is. Like, the humour is not clever in any way. It borders on being quite racist and homophobic in quite a few ways. Yeah, if I started this again and I knew Postal would be on the list, it would be on its own tier of just being absolute drac. Shantae I haven't played. I am interested in playing because I like platformers, but I've not got round to it. Heretic X Hexmen I haven't played. Pac-Man, not good. Like, I played Pac-Man a lot. Who hasn't? But I'm not really interested in anything Pac-Man has to offer. Tetris is a masterpiece. For all the complexities and intricacies of modern gaming, there's something to be said for keeping it simple, and if there's a game that personifies or exemplifies the idea of keeping it simple, it is Tetris, developed by Alexei, I can't remember the surname. I played Tetris for hours and hours, but you know, even I had friends' dads who never played another video game. They would play Tetris for hours and hours. I knew so many people who had Game Boys and would just play Tetris. Yeah, it's a masterpiece game. I don't really know much about the rest of the series. I know there's different versions of Tetris released, and I have watched people play competitive Tetris, which is quite interesting to watch. Just the speed their minds are able to figure it all out at is brilliant. Yeah, it's a masterpiece series. Serious Sam is mid for me. I think with Serious Sam, my peak interest in Serious Sam was on the original Xbox. They released maybe 1 or 2 different games. Maybe, I don't know if it was like First Encounter, Second Encounter, or what exactly the games were called. But you could play them split screen. You could play the Serious Sam... you could play the Serious Sam campaigns multiplayer on the same console, on the same screen, and that was my bag. That was where it really elevated it for me. I'd played it on the PC before, but they were fine on the PC playing alone, but playing with a friend in the same room, oh yeah, like I would maybe give them a go again on console at some point, playing with mates, if I ever got round to it. Bomberman, I keep an eye on Bomberman just because I played Bomberman on the SNES with my cousins at my aunt's house all the time. We would play Bomberman for hours and hours. There's nothing more satisfying than trapping someone in a little square with a box with a bomb. So they're stuck between a box and a bomb and just letting them explode, and you have that kind of second or two to mock them before they get eliminated from the game. I don't mind Bomberman. Excitebike I've never really played. Splinter Cell, I'd say I've got above average for me in terms of how much I like the series. Again, the older games were more my bag. Chaos Theory. Splinter Cell 1 was one of the most graphically impressive games to come out at the time. I don't know how many of you remember, but like the lighting and the light meter and everything, it was a gorgeous looking game. Gorgeous looking game. It really showed off what the original Xbox could do. Pandora Tomorrow was a bit of a misstep, and then Chaos Theory kind of really brought it back and was by far the best of the three, I think. Maybe not as trend-setting as the original, but it was the best. I liked Double Agent, I didn't like Conviction, and then I'm yet to play... There was that one that was released on... I think it was Xbox 360, was it? Or was it the last generation of consoles, where it took it back to the more traditional Splinter Cell experience? Black Sight? Something like that, maybe, I think it was called, which I should actually go and play, and I think I'd forgotten about it until I just started talking about Splinter Cell a second ago. So yeah, Splinter Cell is a series I really rate. Ultimate Alliance, I played a little bit of the first one on the Xbox, but not enough that I can comment on particularly. Ghost Recon for me is probably a not good at this point. I remember playing Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter. I hope it was Advanced Warfighter, Urban Warfighter, because I know there were the two on the Xbox 360, the third-person ones, which were really entertaining, which I think was set in the Middle East. I think maybe, and then there was one later which kind of brought that series back. Maybe Advanced Warfighter was the later one, and it was called like, I can't remember, or maybe Future Soldier, I can't remember. But yeah, I don't mind the Ghost Recon series basically, but I haven't got a whole lot to say about it. Wasteland I've never really played. I have kind of been intrigued by it because it's got Fallout vibes to it, so maybe at some point, because I know they're all on Game Pass. Hitman for me, I think, is a very good... Hitman's never really had a lull apart from Hitman Absolution. Hitman 1, 2, Hitman Contracts were all really entertaining. Blood Money was the best in the series, I think. I can't remember if that was the one that introduced, you know, the accidental deaths and things. But Hitman Blood Money had so many good levels, you know, going around the Opera House, the Mardi Gras celebrations, the wedding in the bayou. And a good It's a Beautiful Life, or It's a Good Life, whatever the one was, where it was just set in suburbia and you had to kill the mob boss who was having a barbecue. So many good levels. Absolution was very disappointing because it became a lot more linear and action focused. There were still some parts of it where there was a bit of the kind of old school style Hitman going on, but a lot of it didn't have that. They tried to make it a more like chase the generic action game kind of sales, and it wasn't what I was looking for after Blood Money had been so brilliant. But then they really brought it back. It was really brought back for the World of Hitman series, Hitman 1, 2 and 3 more recently. I remember getting, I think it was the beta, or because it was released episodically at first, and I remember getting in the beta, you got to play the kind of the 2 training levels, and then the art gallery in Paris came out, and it was such a return to form, and I love that series now. I love it, and I'm there for anything Hitman again going forward. Blood Money, it peaked, then it went downhill with Absolution, and now I'm fully invested in Hitman again. Love it. Perfect Dark. This is a hard one because there's really only been 2 games and one of them wasn't that good. I'm going to put my interest in Perfect Dark as good these days, or my love of the series as good these days. Obviously, Perfect Dark, I wanted another James Bond game after GoldenEye, and we got Perfect Dark instead from Rare. And actually, it was the game I never knew I wanted, but that I absolutely adored. The laptop gun, Elvis the Alien, I think his name was, Joanna Dark, the whole kind of espionage, the soundtrack. But then Perfect Dark Zero on the Xbox 360 came along. I think that was a launch title, and I was just desperate for that to be good, and it didn't turn out to be good. And now I know there's maybe been a reboot of Perfect Dark that's been planned, but I don't know why they're bothering at this point. I just don't think the Perfect Dark name has the cachet, the cash necessary. I don't know if I'm just making up words there. I don't really know if it has the weight behind the franchise that it's going to be, unless it's absolutely incredible. This is I think the issue Microsoft or whoever's bringing it back are going to have. If the game is like a masterpiece game, fine, then Perfect Dark will be revived. I don't know that there's the weight behind the franchise anymore, that if it's just good or if it's just pretty good, that will drive sales, it being Perfect Dark. I'm not sure, so I think they're kind of in a rock and a hard place with that one. I have never played, is that One Piece there? One Piece Pirate Warriors? Never played. Nights, people are going to get annoyed at me at this. I did play Nights and Nights into Dreams on the Saturn back in the day at a friend's, but I can't remember how much of them I played, so I'm going to put it there. Jak and Daxter I got for Christmas. I got the first Jak and Daxter, and I was very, very excited about it because it was Naughty Dog making a new platforming series, and also there'd been some talk by Naughty Dog developers at the time in the magazines about how Jak and Daxter, they were kind of going for a bit of a Mario 64 vibe almost, where you had these kind of more big open levels and you could look and see other stuff, but I didn't realise to what extent they were talking, because it wasn't really like Mario 64, and it might not have been Mario 64 they were referring to, it may have been another game, I'm sure it was though. But it wasn't actually like that at all. It was better because you were in there were hub world kind of things, or like little hubs that you had to move between using, like, I think cable cars or something, or maybe there were different ways of moving between them. But like the first place you start out in Jak and Daxter, for example, you can see a beach, you can see a jungle, you can see a couple of other places, you can see an island in the distance, and you can just go to all those places in real time and do a load of platforming and stuff. And the first Jak and Daxter, as a platforming fan, is one of my favourite platformers. I revisit it all the time. I was really disappointed that they brought guns into 2 and 3 and went with this darker tone. The darker tone, I guess, was something interesting, but I felt strongly that Ratchet and Clank already kind of had the guns and stuff. I just wanted platforming, and I preferred like the greener, more beautiful aesthetic of the original. So 2 and 3 disappointed me, and I think that's why it only makes it to good for me. I also played Daxter on the PSP, which was a surprisingly fun game. But yeah, it just let me down a little bit after the first one. SOCOM I've never really played. Another game, weirdly, I used to follow the online scene, but not actually play. I was kind of intrigued, because there were a lot of clans playing through whatever site it was. It was interesting to me because it was the first time I'd really seen a lot of clans on a console game, people playing on the PS2 with the network adapter. So that piqued my interest, but I'd never really played it myself. World War I game series, I'm not even sure what games they're referring to. Don't know. Jet Set Radio, I think, is a good for me. Jet Set Radio on the Dreamcast, I think, did it popularise cell shading? It probably did popularise cell shading. It was a very cool, very stylish, very entertaining game. I still listen to the Jet Set Radio soundtrack to this day. My favourite tune is Bout the City. You know, do-da-do-da, listen to the music. I need to not sing on videos because my wife will take the piss out of me relentlessly if she heard it, or if she can hear it. I hope she can't. But I still listen to the soundtrack from Jet Set Radio. And then Jet Set Radio Future for the Xbox's launch was tremendous, and I am so happy that Sega are bringing back Jet Set Radio, because I think there's a lot left in the tank for that series. I don't think there needs to be any great innovations to it. I think it's already really fun, because it's almost a kind of pseudo platformer in a way, right? The way you move around the levels and stuff. I don't think there needs to be like sweeping innovations on it. I hope they don't go with like some gigantic open world. I would prefer to see maybe either smaller, compact, open worldy bits, like where, you know, in the mold of like a Ground Zeroes, where it's like maybe a little bit open but not like sweeping, because, you know, sometimes it looks like a good idea for a game to go open world, and it seems like it should be, because Jet Set Radio, you think maybe it would work like that, but then you look at something like Mirror's Edge and its sequel, and the sequel, Mirror's Edge's sequel, we all thought we wanted an open world Mirror's Edge, and it just didn't pan out to be what we hoped for, I think, in the end. So I hope that's handled with care. Splatoon I've never really played. Fear is mid for me, only because the first Fear was pretty amazing. The physics when you shot people in slow-mo and they'd smash through windows and you can see the tracers, is a really, really good looking game. I really liked the horror elements. I thought that kind of action crossed with horror was something quite unique at the time. The AI, the way enemies communicated, I'm sure a lot of that was just clever scripting, although I'm not entirely sure, and I'd have to really read up on that. I'm sure there'll be some brilliant people who have done some brilliant YouTube videos talking about the AI and stuff, but the AI at the time, it really felt like they were communicating and you were getting, you were getting flanked. But if you listened, you could maybe pick up on there being a flank. You could hear them saying that they were going behind. Fear 2 and 3, I didn't think much of at all. I think I finished Fear 2 and never played Fear 3, or maybe played a little bit of Fear 3. I think the franchise tailed off really quickly, but I think it deserves to be kind of in the just about the top half of this list because of how good the first one was. If they did like a reboot of the series, I'd pay attention. Crysis is actually kind of the same for me. I really liked the first one. I really liked Far Cry beforehand, so I was quite into Crysis. My PC couldn't play it for love nor money. I mean, this was another game that just snail's pace frame rates, but I persevered and got through it. I know there was another Crysis afterwards, wasn't there? Spearhead or something like that? Or maybe that's completely the wrong name for it. But I know there was 1 or 2 expansion packs, which I never really played. I haven't played much of 2 or 3 either, but it's another one where I've had multiple YouTube commenters asking me about it, and I'm pretty sure they're on Xbox Game Pass as well. So maybe a series I'll revisit sometime in the future. But yeah, I've had some fun with it. Grand Blue Fantasy, never played. Dungeon Fighter, never played. Brothers in Arms, I'm going to go not good. I played the first or second one, Route 31, Highway to Hell. I forget what the name of it was. The strategy element of it was intriguing because I'd not played a game that kind of kept you so close in the action in World War II, but at the same time wasn't just a Call of Duty. It had elements of Call of Duty, I suppose, in terms of, having allies around you and things like that, and set pieces and stuff, but it was a very different experience to actually play, and I did enjoy it, but not enough that I'm really that fussed about going back to them. Neo, despite having played and finished every FromSoft title, I've never really taken much of an interest in Neo. I think I just have my fill of that style of game from Software, and I'm not really looking for more, but I know that they are decent games. Amnesia's going to go as good for me, just because it's a bit up and down in terms of quality. Amnesia: The Dark Descent was the game that I think it was the game that really started that trend of YouTubers grossly overreacting to any scare, and I just can't stand it. I hated it at the time, I hated it now, No one's jumping up and flinging their arms in the air and screaming around the whole time. It was just over the top and stupid, but it got views, so I suppose good for them. But I love the game. I love the game. As much as I hated the YouTube culture around it, I loved Amnesia: The Dark Descent. I played a lot of Penumbra beforehand by Frictional, but that was never really what you'd call a mainstream series. And then Amnesia came, and I was so glad that it kind of broke out and became this massive hit, because it really deserved to be. It's an absolutely terrifying game. There are parts of it maybe nowadays that don't hold up so well. The sanity system, for example, once you kind of know how the sausage is made, so to speak, with that, it maybe becomes a bit less frightening, but great. A Machine for Pigs actually has a tremendous story. The sequel, although it wasn't developed by Frictional, it was developed by the Chinese room. It actually has a brilliant story, but the gameplay is a walking simulator, as you might have expected. I can't remember what game it was the company had done before. Was it Dear Esther, maybe, was the game that the Chinese room had done before? But they really bought that into a Machine for Pigs. It was a lot of walking around. There were maybe a couple of sections where you could die if you didn't move quick enough or whatever, but you're really just strolling through kind of a Victorian London place. But the plot was fantastic. Amnesia Rebirth I thought was good but not great. I thought it was better than A Machine for Pigs, but there were elements of it I didn't like. I wasn't that fascinated about going to the weird alien world. I found Tarzi to be annoying at times, the amount of belly touching she did with the baby, and little one all the time, calling it little one every 2 minutes. Little one, how are you doing, little one? Blah. That annoyed me. I thought the bunker was really entertaining. I thought the bunker was not what I expected, and I'd love to see Frictional move away from Amnesia and do more one-off experiences, and I suppose the bunker was that in terms of gameplay, and it does fit into the series in terms of the lore, which I know a lot of people like the lore of Amnesia, but I'd like to see them do one-offs like Soma, because while it's not part of the Amnesia series, if you play Soma you'll know how good Soma is. So the Amnesia series though I'm there for, really like it. Monster Rancher I've never really played. Top Gear I've never really played. Horizon Chase I've genuinely never heard of. Dead Space, very good for me, actually, when I think about it. Dead Space 1 was a really cool... It was basically Resident Evil 4 in space for all intents and purposes, and the developers said so themselves. They said in interviews that they were... looked at Resident Evil, took a lot of inspiration from Resident Evil 4, but they did their own thing with it. They came up with a really interesting story with Isaac Clarke. The Necromorphs were quite a cool enemy, and I really liked the limb chopping off mechanic, and the setting and everything about it. So while it maybe took inspiration from Resident Evil 4, it wasn't derivative. And the sequel, yes. It was like Assassin's Creed 2 and a couple of others I've touched on. It was exactly what a sequel should have been. I think some people maybe were a tad upset that it maybe was a bit more action focused. They felt it was less scary. I didn't get that vibe as much. I thought there were some sections that were scarier than anything found in the original. You know, when you come across the Stalkers or whatever that enemy is called for the first time, and you know, the sequence set in the nursery is brilliant. Unfortunately, and returning to the Ishimura, amazing. Unfortunately, 3 kind of dropped the ball. It's not a bad game. But I think when the first thing you get in 3 is fighting enemies with guns, it's not a good sign, and it never really recovered. Although there are elements I find intriguing, like in multiplayer, where one of you might be having visions but the other isn't. That's a really clever idea. I'd like to see a remake of it, and I'd like to see a remake of 2 as well, because the original of Dead Space, the remake of the original Dead Space, which I've just finished playing on stream a few weeks back, a near perfect remake in my mind. It's one of those that's up there with maybe Resident Evil's remake, where they've taken the original game, they've improved the gameplay, they've expanded the story in meaningful ways without straying too far from the original. It feels like they've held the original in high regard and just iterated and tweaked and expanded in all the right places. I was so impressed with the Dead Space remake. I don't know if there are any plans to remake the second game, but I really hope they do, because if it's anything like the first one, that'll be a really exciting title to play. Rock Band is trash for me. I've tried it once at a friend's house. Zero interest in it. Parappa the Rapper, I think, probably goes in not good. I enjoyed playing Parappa the Rapper back in the day. I have fond memories of Grandmaster Onion and, you know, Chip Chop, It's All in Your Mind. Blah, blah, I can't even remember the words anymore. And I played the second one on PlayStation 2 as well, but I ain't looking out for a Parappa the Rapper game. I don't really know what Blood is. The Witcher... I think The Witcher goes as very good for me. I haven't played much of the first. I played the second on the Xbox 360. I think it was The Witcher 2 Ultimate Edition when it came out. Really liked it. Really liked the way your decisions could change. Obviously, it's a game that's not got the scope of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. But that's what got me interested in the series. At that point, I would have said after playing The Witcher 2, I was around the good to above average in terms of my love of the series, my interest in it. The Witcher 3 is one of my top 10 games of all time. It's middling in terms of gameplay, and that includes even doing the story and side missions, where a lot of the time it is do the detective mode thing, which, by the way, is a mechanic I really wish games would stop using. I hate detective mechanic. I don't want to hold a button when I'm exploring environments. Anyway. You would hold a button, you would talk to some people maybe, hold a button down, follow some trails, fight a boss, and do those things in different orders a few times. That would be a lot of the gameplay. The story attached to that gameplay is... I can't really think of much better. Disco Elysium, maybe. Beyond that, I can't really think of many games that have had me so... It's because with The Witcher, it's not just the story, it's the scope. There's so much story that's so good. It's like Disco Elysium. It's not just that it's so well written, it's that there's so much that's so consistent. When you're writing that many thousands of lines of dialogue, telling that many little tiny stories and bigger stories within the same world, and they're all consistently amazing, that's when I really sit up and take notice. And The Witcher 3 did that. Even just the small side quests had these really interesting little moral quandaries, or really interesting little kind of fairy tale-esque morality tales, you know. Nothing but good things to say about it. And the DLC, especially Blood and Wine, tip-top DLC. Hearts of Stone, a little bit smaller in scope. Blood and Wine is basically another Witcher 3 on top of The Witcher 3. Hell yes. Roll on The Witcher 4, cannot wait. Bloons Tower Defense, I've genuinely never heard of. Dragon Age is a mid. Dragon Age Origins had the whole, you picked your character and then there will be different introductions, and it was a very, very, very good RPG. But then Dragon Age 2, and was there even a third Dragon Age? Was there a Dragon Age 3 as well, or did it go straight to Inquisition? I kind of skipped out after the original Dragon Age and then returned for Inquisition, and Inquisition was just a flaming pile of rubbish. So many fetch quests. I'm sure the story was good underneath all the fetch questing and everything else, but it was a game... I can't remember what game it was I mentioned earlier, where I said it bought... Oh, Final Fantasy 12 maybe I mentioned, bought in kind of MMORPG stylings to a single player experience, and Dragon Age Inquisition did the same. I don't think I got more than a third to a half of the way through it. Really, really wound me up as a game. It annoyed me more than anything else to play that game. Luckily, it was at a point in my life where the older I've got, the more willing I've been to drop experiences and not just try and finish them and sink loads of hours into them because I've started. And that was one of the first titles where I made that decision, was Dragon Age Inquisition, because man, it was just, there was a lot of filler, way too much filler. I am looking forward to seeing what happens with the next one that comes out though, because I don't know what they're doing with the series, if it's a sequel or reboot or what, but I'm ready to play it if it turns out to be good. Baldur's Gate is a good, but it could turn out to be a very good. Baldur's Gate 3 I've not played yet. I have to add that as a caveat. I thought about playing it at launch, but then I heard about glitches and things, so I thought I'll wait. So I'm probably going to wait until it's been out a year, and when it's been out a year and it's had lots of patches and stuff, I think I'll jump into it then. I very much take the opinion with a lot of games now. If I hear anything about them having a lot of glitches or bugs or anything like that, I just think I'll wait 6 months, I'll wait a year now. I already have enough going on with the YouTube and actually having to try to play other games and do all that stuff together, and just being older now, that I'm not so dead set a lot of the time on playing games as soon as they come out. I liked Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 as well back in the day, which is why this is already at a good. But if Baldur's Gate 3 is as good as I've heard it is, as I've seen it is, as I think it probably is going to be, then this is a series that might move up to very good, or even it could arguably move up to masterpiece, because I loved the older games as well. If Baldur's Gate 3 does turn out to be as good as I expect, this could go up to be a masterpiece series. Actually, I'll tell you what, I'm going to put this in very good to begin with, because I don't think there's been a bad game in the series particularly. Worms is one of those series like Bomberman. I've very intentionally put it here next to Bomberman because it's another one of those games. We used to play it at school. It was one of the games we managed to install on the school computers. So you'd have like however many of us sat each at a computer at school during lunch break, someone keeping an eye out to see if the teachers were coming, and we'd play Worms multiplayer. I have little interest in the series these days, but I do have a warm and fuzzy feelings of nostalgia when I think about it. Ultima, I've never really played. I've heard a lot about it over the years, but I've never played it. Five Nights at Freddy's, I've not got a lot of interest in as a horror game. I've played the first couple maybe, and maybe tried to jump back into the series later on. But mechanically, it's just not a game that interests me. This is another one that's for the YouTube, I don't know what to call them. You know what I mean? Like Amnesia. It's for people to overreact to on YouTube. Interestingly to me, a lot of people seem to be into Five Nights at Freddy's for the plot, and I think that's kind of cool. I like that side of it. I like that it's not just jump scares and that's all there is to it. Apparently there's this really interesting lore and theory crafting underneath. I find that cool. I'm not that interested in it myself, but that's why I've kind of put it a couple of levels above the bottom. But yeah, as actual games, I've not really fussed by them, to be honest. Ape Escape, I think I played a demo of the first one on the PlayStation, and that's about it. Super Monkey Ball, the same. I've never really indulged in it too much. Shenmue was above average for me. My interest has dropped a bit since Shenmue 3 because I was disappointed by Shenmue 3. I know it was a Kickstarter game and they didn't have the budget that obviously Shenmue 1 and 2 had comparatively. But yeah, it kind of let me down. Shenmue 1 and 2, I love to death. I love everything about them. The original especially, that was the game on the Dreamcast that just it demonstrated that the console had the potential to outdo the PlayStation 2. But obviously the PlayStation 2 came off the momentum of the PlayStation 1. It had a DVD player. It was the more adult console people thought at that stage, whereas Sega was maybe still clinging on to Sonic and the like. And obviously the Dreamcast also had issues with copy protection. Unfortunately, it was very easy to copy and play copied games on it. Shenmue, though, was just... the detail in the world at the time was unprecedented. If Grand Theft Auto 3 brought the kind of open world in terms of just a sprawling city for you to go and mess around in, then Shenmue was very much the open world, where it was smaller but packed full of stuff for you to do and details. You could go into the arcade and play you could play like Outrun and things like that. And the story was great. The theme I listen to all the time. It's on my best of video games playlist I have on my Spotify. And then Shenmue 2 built on it. I prefer the original to Shenmue 2, beyond the looking for sailors meme, which I still enjoy to this day. Great series, but I wouldn't say I'm looking forward to it as much as I was before Shenmue 3 came out. I will forever remember fondly, though, the E3 2015 Sony conference where they had The Last Guardian, Final Fantasy VII Remake and Shenmue 3 all in one conference. What a stunning hour to an hour and a half of video game conferencing that was, eh? Atelier, I've never played. Sakura Wars, never played. Football Manager, trash tier for me, just because I have zero patience. I have loads of friends who have been into Football Manager at various points in their lives. I just don't have the patience. I would rather be playing football myself, or watching football, or playing an actual football game. I just don't like Football Manager. Prey is going to go as above average for me. I assume they're talking about it as a series. Well, I guess it is a franchise technically, because you have Prey that came out back in 2006, maybe 2005-6, that came out on the Xbox 360 and the PC, which was about a dude named, I think, Tommy, could be wrong, who was a Native American, and you get sucked up from your bar onto a ship, and it's got a very kind of Quakey vibe. It's these kind of half mechanical, half kind of alien or demon-y kind of looking monsters. It had a cool mechanic with portals, and a mechanic where if you died you had to shoot birds with a bow, I believe, to come back, which I think made the game a little easy. It was a fine enough kind of Doom Quake style shooter. The Prey, which came out many years later, which has absolutely zero to do with the original, is the BioShock 3 that Infinite should have been. Or I guess the System Shock 3 we never got, perhaps. I really cannot recommend Prey enough, and it was one of the best games of that generation. Arcane do terrific work. Dishonored, of course, was them as well. They slumped a bit recently with Redfall, but Prey is amazing. It has one of the best openings of any video game, full stop. I think I did a video about the 10 best openings in video games. Prey is there, and I've done a longer video about that opening on its own as well. That should tell you how good it is, that I did a whole video just on Prey's opening. But the rest of the game is, I actually might go back and play it now that I've started talking about it. I've really got a hankering for like an IM-sim. I think you'd call Prey an IM-sim. Maybe you wouldn't. Oh no, I think you would. You would call Prey an IM-sim. BioShock you wouldn't call an IM-sim. Prey you'd call an IM-sim. I've actually got a hankering maybe to go back and play it. And also the DLC Moon Crash is another example of like top tier DLC. I only played that recently and it's amazing. Digimon Rumble Arena I've never played. Flat out I've never really played. Day of Defeat, that can go straight in the mid for me. I mentioned earlier that we used to play a lot of Counter-Strike. Day of Defeat, Natural Selection and Team Fortress. Day of Defeat was probably my favourite, the second favourite after Counter-Strike. Played a lot of the original Day of Defeat. Never really played it so much when it went on to Source. But I really liked Day of Defeat because I played a lot of Return to Castle Wolfenstein at the time. And a bit of Call of Duty Online, I think, as well. Which were both kind of faster paced, kind of World War II-esque games. Whereas Day of Defeat kind of had a slower, more methodical vibe to it. You know, you had rifles where I think you only had one shot. But if you hit that shot, pardon me, you'd kill someone in an instant. I liked it. Disgaea, never played. I know of it, but I've never played it. I've never really played any of the Tales games. I think I started trying to play Symphonia or one of the ones on the 360 that a lot of people were going on about, but never really got into it. Horizon is mid for me. I think Horizon is a beautiful game. I think it has a very interesting plot. Sorry, this is Zero Dawn I'm talking about in particular. I thought the game, I didn't get what people were going on about with the game. I thought the game was generic as anybody's business, and a lot of you watching, if you know me, you'll know about my views on open world games. Generic as can be, climbing up things to unlock stuff on a map, a lot of busy work. The design of the robot dinosaurs was cool, but once you've done a few of them, you've pretty much done all of them, I felt. I mean, that's probably unfair. There are a lot of different strategies and things, but I haven't got round to playing Forbidden West yet. I'll probably pick it up when it comes out on PC soon, but I don't think it's as good as some people think it is. I think there's a lot of busy work involved. Valkyria Chronicles is a good for me, but only for the first one. If you're into SRPGs at all, go and play Valkyria Chronicles. I own it on about 3 different systems. Valkyria Chronicles is set in a fictional place, and it's basically about a war between these 2 kingdoms, one bigger than the other. It's got a lot of actually kind of World War II vibes to it, especially with regards to a certain darker part of World War II, which is kind of surprisingly touched on in the game, which belies its cartoony aesthetic and kind of generally being a fairly happy game. But the original Valkyria Chronicles, I think, is one of the best games on the PlayStation 3. You can get it on Steam now. You can get it on the PS4, which I think means you can buy it on the PS5 as well. Beautiful soundtrack, a really warm, happy game a lot of the time. If you're expecting a really deep SRPG, you're not going to get that. It's you kind of control your troops around the battlefield, but you go into third person and then you aim, and there's kind of a percentage chance, and you hit a button, and you depends on how many times you'll hit them. So it's not like mega deep, but at the same time, for someone like me who's not a big SRPG fan, or for maybe some of you watching, if you don't want to get into some deep tactical strategy role-playing game, this is actually a really good one. Highly recommend it. One of my favourite games. I haven't played the rest of them. I'm putting it here based on that first one. Maybe I'm being a bit of a hypocrite with some of the criticism I've given other titles, I don't know. But yeah, go play the original. Dragon Ball Z, The Legacy of the... I don't know anything about. Don't know anything about that either. Oh yes, Dead Rising. Dead Rising is going in good as well. I actually had an Xbox with about 30 games, and one of my biggest regrets is trading in my Xbox with about 30 games, because I had like the Knights of the Old Republic games and some games that are pretty rare now, and games I would like to own on disc. I'd like to have an Xbox with loads of games. I really regret selling it. Let that be a lesson. I mean, I suppose it's not so much of an issue now with everything being digitised. Don't sell your old stuff. Keep it. It's never worth trading in. Dead Rising... So what was the... Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. What was the moral of that story? Well, the moral... Don't sell your old consoles. Why was I telling you that story? Because I actually traded it all in to buy an Xbox 360. I think it was called a Core. It was literally an Xbox with a controller, and that was it. You couldn't even save games, I believe, until you bought a memory card. There was also the arcade, I think, which came with a 4 or a 20... It might have been a 20 gig hard drive that slotted on the side, and you got a headset, maybe a nicer controller or a different controller. I can't remember, but you got a few bits with it. But I couldn't afford that. What I could afford was a Core Xbox, and the reason I wanted an Xbox was because of Dead Rising, and kind of Call of Duty 2 as well, but Dead Rising in particular. I'd seen that Dead Rising was coming out, so I thought I've got to get my hands on it to play Dead Rising, because I love zombie stuff again. I also really love George A. Romero's Dead trilogy. That is Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead. If you're a horror fan and you haven't seen them, or if you're a fan of movies in general, you should go and watch them. Brilliant social commentary mixed with what looks outwardly like simple zombie movies. They're not. They're much deeper. They're terrific. Dead Rising is very similar to Dawn of the Dead in that it's in a mall with lots of zombies, and that really piqued my interest. I also really loved the soundtrack in the trailers. I don't know if you remember in Dawn of the Dead, it had that mall sounding soundtrack. It was and then Dead Rising had its own kind of anyway. Again, I hope my wife didn't hear me doing that, because I'll be embarrassed. I'm embarrassed anyway. I'll watch this back and be embarrassed. It really lived up to my expectations, because all I wanted was a mall packed full of zombies, hundreds of zombies, and like loads of interesting ways to kill the zombies, and that's exactly what Dead Rising delivered. I wasn't a massive fan of the whole timed element and being able to miss things. I also thought that the fact was actually almost a prerequisite that you had to play the game, level up a bit, then restart, because you could restart with what you'd leveled up. And until I'm sure you can do it without doing that, but I would always recommend to people when you play it to level up a load and then start a proper game that you're going to go through to the end, because otherwise it's just super hard and annoying to play. And that is a big X against it, to be fair. I played some Dead Rising 2 and I've never gone back to the series since, because it looked like it just went too overboard on the ridiculousness of it all. And that's not to say Dead Rising isn't ridiculous, it is, with all the psychopaths. You had a dual chainsaw wielding clown, for goodness sake. But there was a balance, I suppose, and the game underneath was really good. I would love to see the series go back to strength, but I'd like to see them take it back to basics. Instead of just adding just more ridiculousness on top all the time. Binding of Isaac I never played, but I should play. I've heard I should play it. I've been wanting to play it. Prince of Persia, the 3 on the PlayStation 2, I think they came out and that I played. I think they were on other consoles as well. I was a big fan of 1 and 3 especially. I think, or maybe it was 1 and 2. I can't remember. There was one of them I didn't like so much. What I would say about those games is they're a really good example of how to design levels where people will naturally figure out how to solve puzzles. I read a great article, I'll try and find after this and maybe link. I'll tell you now, I'm going to forget to do it. But there was a really good article I read, someone had written about how the game used like shadows and light to show you where you were able to jump safely and where you shouldn't jump, and how it led you through the environment. And yeah, they're just great games, really playable, fun games, almost platformers in a way a lot of the time. I did also play the kind of more cartoony one that came out a few years later on the PlayStation 3, I think I had it. And I'm actually intrigued by the new one as well, although I haven't got round to playing it yet, because I believe it's made by some of the team that made the Rayman games. The more recent Rayman games, Origins and Legends, which I'm hoping will appear. Is there Rayman on this list? Yes, there is. So I'm not going to talk about Rayman yet. But it's by the team that made those Rayman games. And it doesn't surprise me to hear that the new one's really good, because of the opinions I'm going to share on Rayman shortly. Driver, not good. 1 and 2 on the PlayStation were really fun games. The second one was especially intriguing because this was being able to get out of a car and wander around. Pre-Grand Theft Auto 3, you couldn't do a whole lot. But it was interesting that it was there before Grand Theft Auto 3, because I think a lot of people think that was really the game that brought that into the 3D space. It wasn't. You could do it in Driver 2 on the original PlayStation. And they had that really cool thing with the chase cam, which I can't remember how it functioned, but it had those cool camera angles when you were doing chases. It was a reasonable series up until 3. 3 was meant to be this big game in the mould of Grand Theft Auto, and obviously everybody was looking forward to it because of the pedigree of the games on the PlayStation. It didn't really turn out well at all. It wasn't a fun game to play. I bought it at launch. It wasn't a fun game to play. It wasn't well written. The graphics were pretty rubbish. It was just completely overshadowed by Grand Theft Auto 3. No one in their right mind, I think, would prefer Driver 3 to Grand Theft Auto 3. And then I think there has been the occasional thing in the series. I understand maybe Driver San Francisco, I think it was called, was meant to be quite good. I never played it. So yeah, these days, we don't care much. Spelunky I've never really played, but I do enjoy watching speedruns of it. True Crime I've never really played, because Grand Theft Auto is enough for me. Clock Tower is a mid-series for me. Again, a horror series, so you know I'm going to be all over it. I recently just finished playing Clock Tower 3 again, which was a PlayStation 2 game. I've just played through that, and I enjoyed it. The SNES games are really interesting as well, especially the earlier ones. I haven't played them in absolutely donkeys, but if I remember correctly, at least one of them was more, you had to kind of use almost like a mouse pointer or, click on it. You weren't running around in third person like a Resident Evil or something like that. There was another one released it's not a Clock Tower. I can't remember what it's called, but I think it was like a Kickstarter, when Kickstarters were all the rage a few years back, or similar, or GoFundMe or whatever they are. No, GoFundMe is just for general stuff, isn't it? I think it was a Kickstarter for the guy who made Clock Tower. I can't remember his name, to make another game in a similar mould, but not called Clock Tower, which was set on a boat that came out. And unfortunately, it turned out not to be too good from what I hear. Otherwise, I would have been all over that. So yeah, given that was the case, that I was waiting for a new Clock Tower-esque thing, and I was still excited, I put Clock Tower at mid. I like the series. I don't know what X is. I don't know what spray-painted looking X is, and someone's going to tell me afterwards, and it's going to annoy me, because it's probably going to be something I should know, but I don't know what it is, so I apologise. Nier is up there as a good for me. The first one I thought was okay. I'm not sure I got to the end of it. I've been playing, or I finished Nier Automata now, but I've been playing it a lot recently because I started writing down my thoughts. So I don't really want to talk about it too much here because I know what I'm like. I don't think through what I say a lot of the time when I'm talking. Hopefully I haven't said anything controversial or stupid during this, but a lot of the time I just... verbal diarrhea, my father would describe it as times. I will just talk. I will just talk without thinking, and I don't want to spoil some of the points that I have in this script. Whether I finish this script or not is yet to be seen, but Nier Automata is a 9 out of 10 game. Absolutely brilliant. That's all I'm going to say for the time being. I can't wait to see what happens to the series next. I'm only putting it in good because the game before that... no. Nah, I'm not. I'm going to keep it in good. I'm going to keep it in good. Tomb Raider, above average. I really liked the reboots, which is why that it's an above average. They really reignited my interest in the franchise. I haven't played the remastered versions of the PlayStation ones, but obviously I grew up playing those. 1 and 2 especially, I spent a lot of time playing. I remember very fondly in 1 finding the T-Rex, and 2 I got stuck on, I think, the second level. Got through the Great Wall of China, but then got horribly stuck on Venice for like a month. This was back in the days when you couldn't just hop on the internet to find out where to go next. A lot of it was word of mouth or calling a phone line that would give you hints. And my parents would tell me off for spending money on the phone line that was like £1 a minute. I got stuck on Venice for ages, but I loved Tomb Raider back in the day, and I think Tomb Raider should be given a lot of kudos because what that franchise did for gaming is it brought it into a more adult space. You have to remember, during the mid-90s even, when the PlayStation came out, it was only really with the PlayStation that whole kind of idea that video games weren't just for, you know, loners and geeks really started to become a much more prevalent thing, because you had Tomb Raider and Lara Croft as like this kind of female icon. You had Wipeout with its soundtrack, you know, its dance music soundtrack, and a few other games, Resident Evil providing a more adult horror experience. It was really... But Lara Croft was a huge part of it. She was really a big part of helping bring gaming into this more mature space, or at least giving people the idea that gaming could be a more mature medium. So whatever you think about Tomb Raider, you know, it has to be given a lot of credit for that. Yeah, looking forward to what comes next for now. Looking forward to what comes next for Lara Croft. Sniper Elite, I've never really played. Diablo for me is a horrible... Again, I feel like this is a series people might get a little bit annoyed at me about for putting it that low. I'm just not really interested in the whole looting and getting more loot and keeping going up with the loot thing. It's why I couldn't get into Destiny particularly, because I don't like doing the same thing a lot of times just to get bigger numbers. It's just not my bag. So I've never really been a fan of Diablo. State of Decay, I've never really played yet. I've been meaning to get around to it and I just haven't. Fable is a mid for me at this stage. I really liked Fable 1 and 2, and I thought 3 was fine, but my interest in the series has begun to wane. I think Fable 1 was a really, really good game. I think Fable 2 was not quite as good, and then, yeah, Fable 3 let me down a bit. I was just trying to remember the name of the guy who worked on these, and it's Peter Molyneux. Never knew... there was a lot of promises from old Pete about what was going to be in these games that didn't quite pan out. It wasn't as egregious as some of the other times he's done that kind of thing. But yeah, I think Fable... I'm looking forward to seeing if they can reboot... Actually, you know, I'm going to put Fable in above average. I think mid is unfair for Fable. Just looking at the other franchises I have in mid, I think it's unfair. I think Fable is above average. And yeah, like a lot of series on this list, I think it's one where, you know, one good game and it's right back up there again. Chivalry, never really played. Samurai Showdown, never really played at all. Dynasty Warriors is just one step above horrible for me. It's just not my kind of game. I took an interest in it when I was younger, but that was just because of the idea of having loads of things on screen seemed really cool to me, but it's not a series I have any interest in these days. The most I've played of a Dynasty Warriors was I actually owned the first Dynasty Warriors, which interestingly, and I hope I'm not getting this wrong and making something up, but if I remember correctly, the first Dynasty Warriors was a beat-em-up, and I believe I had that beat-em-up on PlayStation. I used to play it loads until eventually Tekken 3 or whatever came out. But until Tekken 3 came out, I think I played a lot of Dynasty Warriors, the beat-em-up. Again, I hope I'm not getting that wrong, and it's a different franchise. I might be getting it completely wrong, and I apologise if I am. Yeah, it's not a series I care that much about. Space Invaders, look, give it credit for what it was back in the day, but I don't really care about it in the present. Monster Hunter goes in there with these other kind of looty games. I can see the appeal, and Monster Hunter World, for example, I've heard nothing but good things about. So again, this is no black mark on the franchise. It's just not for me from what I've played. I played a lot of the games on the PSP. Can't remember what it's called, Monster Hunter something, I can't remember. But I spent a good amount of time playing one of them on the PSP, so I know what's going on. But yeah, just not my bag. Men of War, no idea what that is. Command and Conquer, below average. I played a lot of Red Alert 2, Yuri's Revenge growing up, Generals as well. These days, strategy's just not my bag, so if there was a really good Command and Conquer, maybe I'd go back to it, but I'd say it's unlikely at this stage. Rage, not good. I mean, they were decent enough shooters, weren't they? I kind of like the Mad Max vibe, although actually the Mad Max game came along and did the Mad Max vibe better. Not that fussed about it these days. Oh, people are going to get angry at me for this one. Undertale, I have been meaning to play. I know it's really bad that I consider myself a gamer and I haven't played Undertale. I had a colleague at work whose son was obsessed with Undertale. And I know a lot of people are obsessed with it, young and old, and I know it's meant to be amazing, and I know I should have played it, and I don't know why I haven't, because it's on Game Pass. I will play it at some point, I promise. It's not one of those ones I've played because I've got no interest in. I know it's meant to be very good, and I will play it soon, I promise. Strider, I actually own the one on PlayStation 4, the reboot that came out, because obviously it was around many moons ago. I never played it back in the day. I own the one on PlayStation 4, the reboot. Haven't got round to playing it. I think I played about 2 minutes of it. Soul Calibur is below average for me. Soul Calibur on the Dreamcast was a revelatory title. It was absolutely brilliant. If you remember, Soul Calibur was called Soul Blade before it became Soul Calibur. I remember playing the Soul Blade demo disc on the PlayStation, and so I wasn't really excited for Soul Calibur, but Soul Calibur the original was amazing. 2 was also very good as well, especially bringing in like Spawn and Link and Heihachi was very cool at the time. But these days I've got not that much of an interest in the franchise. Again, my love of fighting games is not particularly big, so yeah, don't mind it. Drakengard, haven't played. Ratchet and Clank probably goes in with Jak and Daxter for me. I haven't played the most recent Ratchet and Clank, A Rift in Time yet, although I will get round to it now it's out on PC. I like the Ratchet and Clank series a lot. I played them all back in the day along with Jak and Daxter. They kind of replaced Crash Bandicoot and Spyro, which were my two go-tos on the previous generation. Well, and Super Mario 64. I will play Ratchet and Clank A Rift in Time, and I played all the others. I really like them, but they're a bit repetitive at this point, which is why they're in the same place as Jak and Daxter. Armored Core, I've very little experience of, although I've been told by many people that the new one is really good. I've read really good things, and I've been told by some of my viewers to play it, so I will go back and play it at some point. Just the new one. Dragon Ball Xenoverse, no idea. Naruto, no idea. Daytona USA, like every child, I've played it on, like every kid back in the day, I've played it on an arcade machine at a bowling alley. But beyond that, I can't read what that says. Sorry. Double Dragon, again, I've maybe played for an hour or two. My uncle very kindly gave me his Commodore 64. So I played it for an hour or two on the Commodore 64. It's a classic game. I think it was maybe the game. I can't remember if it's this or River City Ransom. I think River City Ransom came afterwards. It was the game that kind of brought the scrolling beat 'em up to the forefront for a while. So give it a lot of credit, but I've not really played it enough that I can say too much about it or the franchise as a whole. Actually, no, no, I haven't. I need to stick to my rule. I didn't finish it. Danganronpa I don't know much about. Rival Schools I played on a PlayStation demo disc, but beyond that. Kirby, I played a couple of the games on the Game Boy back in the day, but it's never really been my bag particularly. I have very little interest in Kirby. I might play one if I hear good things. I did take an interest. I played a lot of the Yarn one. Was it Yarn or was it Patchwork? I can't remember. I played one of the two and I really enjoyed that one, but that was a one-off. Shovel Knight I've not played. That's another game I've been wanting to get around to. Little Big Planet. I bought the original Little Big Planet at launch. I really enjoyed playing other people's levels. I fiddled around on the creator myself but never made anything. And I played the single player, and I haven't really been interested in it since. And yeah, it's fine. Super Robot Wars, I believe, was predominantly like a SNES series, wasn't it? SNES franchise. I don't know. It's fine. I don't know much about it. Advance Wars, very, very good series. No, I'm going to put Advance Wars above average, actually. Advance Wars, for me, was an obsession when it first came out. I believe the first came out, was it Advance Wars 1 and 2 that were both Game Boy Advance titles to begin with? Perhaps I'm wrong, maybe it was before that. But I played Advance Wars 1 and 2 all day, every day, when each of them came out, for like multiple weeks at a time when each of them released. Really, really good franchise, really, really good fun, just the right level of hard. The difficulty balancing on them was really good. These days, I would like to play the remasters. I don't know if they came out on Switch, maybe? Are they recent enough they came out on Switch? But I think maybe if I got a Switch 2 and I could get hold of the remasters, I'd definitely go back to the series. Syndicate, I've never really played. Very good for me, Oddworld. There are a few games that left an impression on me like Abe's Odyssey did. When I got my PlayStation, I was very much looking for 3D experiences. I thought, 3D graphics. I was young. 3D seemed like the new and exciting thing. Graphics. I think the older I've got, the less I've worried about graphics. It's more about aesthetic, I think. How interesting is the world, how visually interesting and well put together and thought out is it, as opposed to it just being raw graphics. But back in the day, when I was really little, I just wanted 3D, everything 3D. Oddworld was a game which convinced me, or Abe's Odyssey specifically, was the game which I think perhaps convinced me that it wasn't all about graphics, and it was fine still to have 2D things, because Abe's Odyssey was just such an original, unique, beautiful experience. I played the demo, which had areas of Rupture Farms locked up out to you. You couldn't go into certain secret areas and things like that, but you could play pretty much until you went up the lift and got out of the area, and I think where you see the moon and you fall down the cliff, and then it begins the Paramite and the Scrab side of things. And I was hooked, and I bought the game, and I found it intensely difficult, but I was hooked, and I played it, and eventually I finished it. Abe's Exodus, another example of an absolutely amazing sequel, took everything the original did well and built on it. Munch's Odyssey was a little bit of a letdown. It originally meant to be a PlayStation 2 title, interestingly, until Microsoft got hold of it for whatever reason. I remember watching the pre-release footage of it on a video cassette that came with a magazine and being like, oh my goodness, it's Abe's Odyssey and Exodus in 3D, seeing the Mudokons chopping wood and stuff. And then actually the game it still had a lot of the Oddworld kind of quirky humour and that kind of thing, but I didn't find the game that fun to play. And then Stranger's Wrath was a real return to form, a very different game from anything which had come before, but a very, very good game, and I highly recommend you play them. You can get the Oddworld collection now for pennies. I actually bought it again the other day, so I have them on Steam, and it was like a couple of quid. Highly recommend it. Lorne Lanning and the team did an amazing job with all of those games. Even Munch's Odyssey is still a good game, even if it's not quite as good as the other three. And then there's also the New and Tasty games, right? Or is the first one called New and Tasty? The remakes. Really enjoyed the first remake. Haven't played the second remake yet. Fabulous series. Got a lot of time with it. I know Lorne Lanning maybe wanted to bring it into film at some point, I remember reading. Would have loved an Abe film. I think Abe, the story of Abe and Rupture Farms in particular, would make a great kind of dark animated movie. Would love to see it. Abe's Odyssey, Abe's Exodus, two of the greatest 2D games ever made. Insurgency, I don't know a lot about. Chrono, very good actually. I don't know why I'm putting it above average. Chrono Cross is one of the best role-playing games ever made. For those of you who don't know, it's a Super Nintendo role-playing game. It was a one-off role-playing game. Final Fantasy is what most people think of when you talk about SNES role-playing games, or maybe Dragon Quest, although I think that's more prevalent in the East especially. But Chrono Trigger was probably the best. I mean, Final Fantasy 5 and 6 maybe in with a shout as well. A spectacular game about time travel that there's nothing quite like. And then Cross is equally brilliant. I wasn't as sure about the battle system in Cross with the area circly thing and the different colours and stuff. If I remember correctly, I might be remembering that completely incorrectly, but it did have a wonderful soundtrack and it was a very good game. So I think very good. Very good. Gundam versus, not got a lot to say. neither for Dragon Ball. Overwatch is mid. If you'd have asked me back in 2016 when Overwatch first came out, I would probably be going somewhere in the above average. No, probably good. But I just think over the years, I've just really I got back into Overwatch for Overwatch 2. And I watched a lot of Overwatch League. The first couple of seasons of the Overwatch League, I watched all the highlights. I watched a lot of the matches all the way through. I knew all the players. You know, I knew all the goings on in the scene and stuff. I think Blizzard killed Overwatch very early on in its life cycle by introducing the Overwatch League. There was a very good kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Ground level's not the right word. Organic scene developing for esports, and Blizzard just kind of killed it when it didn't need to be killed to bring this Overwatch League in and get these teams to spend millions. And it just didn't, the whole thing just fell apart. And I mean, part of that is because of COVID. My team was the London Spitfire, and it was a team owned by Cloud9, an American organisation, entirely Korean players. And that's fine because, you know, I support Fulham Football Club. Not a lot of English players playing for the team. That's not an issue. But when the thing that is meant to connect you to the regional team is these homestand or homestead or whatever they called them, where they were going to have the games play in the actual cities where the teams are based, unless you have that aspect, it is going to feel alien when, like, there's nothing about London unless they have the things being played in. Anyway, I thought it really killed the game, and I just think the time to kill and everything else, and the meta balancing goats and things, it just too many missteps for me. I find it frustrating at times to play as well. Sometimes the time to kill, and it's a game where if you have bad teammates, it can really kill the vibe of the game. I might revisit it now because there's been a massive patch that apparently really changes things, so I'll maybe hop back into Overwatch 2. But actually, I think over the years, on balance, I think it's been quite mishandled as a franchise, and I get annoyed by it sometimes. Red Faction below average. I really enjoyed the first Red Faction, being able to shoot your way from one base to another in the multiplayer with friends. You could literally blow a hole in the wall that bent all the way around to the other team's base. Was amazing. The actual game that was attached to the single player experience is fine, but I actually found most of those fun interactions came out when you were playing with a mate in the split screen multiplayer, in terms of the Geo mod, which was this blowing up holes and deforming the environment around you. Red Faction 2 actually lost a lot of that, which I was quite disappointed about. I was very disappointed about. But then they brought it back with, I think, was it Red Faction Guerrilla? Was the one they brought back where it was set on Mars and it was third person. That was actually a really, really good game, and I think they've remastered it recently. So I kind of have an interest, although I think Armageddon, was it after that, kind of killed my enthusiasm again. It's a series I have an interest in, and I'd love to see it be brought back again in the future with, you know, an even more realistic, like, destruction systems. But it's really about the destruction systems for me. I don't care about, like, the plot or anything else particularly. I don't know what R is it Ring of Red or Rule of Rose or something like that, maybe? I'm not sure. Haven't played. I'll put Commandos at below average. I really enjoyed Commandos 1 and 2 back in the day. For those of you who don't know, they're isometric kind of strategy games. No, I don't know what genre you'd put them in, actually, but you basically control a small squad of commandos in World War II, and you kind of move them around the map, and you have, like, I think you had certain classes. I picked these up, for those of you in England, if you remember, you used to be able to go into, like, places like Game, and they'd have, like, those 3 for a tenner. I can't remember what the product lines were called, but you get, like, those PC games where they were, like, re-releases that were, like, 3 for a tenner. So I always used to get, like, Commandos and things like that for PC through those offers. And Commandos is really, really fun. Again, these days I don't have as much time for strategy games, so it's not as highly ranked as it would be when I was maybe 13, but I like the series. Borderlands, controversial, not good. Borderlands is very, very fun to play. I always have a good time with Borderlands, and I think the humour is enjoyable. But again, the core loop is around this kind of looting, and no, I'm being unfair. It's got to go one up. I think below average for Borderlands. I just never really got its hooks into me for some reason. I've really tried. I finished the first game and I've tried to go back to 2 and 3, and I think maybe one of the other ones, was there the pre-sequel as well? I've tried like 3 or 4 times to go back to the series because I know how many people adore it, and I just can't get into it. I've tried so hard, and I don't know if it's again like that kind of Diablo-esque thing where it's like I don't care about getting weapons with slightly higher numbers. I don't know if that plays into it. Maybe I've got that in my head and it's stopping me from enjoying it so much. There's just something about the series that has never really got its hooks into me, but I'm not saying that it couldn't in the future. Max Payne is very good for me. Max Payne 1 and 2 are both excellent titles. Nothing has really done that I've played that kind of film noir kind of vibe like Max Payne has. The original had the bullet time system it introduced, which are following hot on the heels of The Matrix in 1999. Was it 99 or 2000? Whatever. Max Payne came out afterwards and basically allowed you to do what you could do, what you saw in The Matrix, Max Payne allowed you to do. But it also had a really compelling story. Max Payne's family died and turned out to be users of a certain drug, V, I believe it was called, and it all built out from there into this kind of noir mob boss, slightly even maybe supernatural-ish story, which 2 expanded on. 3 I need to go back and play. I played 3 once on the 360, and I'll be honest with you, I gave it short shrift. I really enjoyed the gameplay. I thought the gameplay was really good, but in terms of how much I enjoyed it, I gave it kind of short shrift because I didn't like that it wasn't all kind of set in kind of, you know, city streets with the film noir vibe. I know there was a shootout in maybe a cemetery where a graveyard where maybe the Max Payne theme was playing and it was all kind of grey and almost black and white, and maybe that was kind of a bit like what I wanted, but I think I gave it short shrift and I don't know that it deserved to get the short shrift that I gave it. So I will go back and play Max Payne 3. What I would say about Max Payne, if you've never played it before and you're thinking maybe you should play it because I put it this highly, they're remastering remaking, I think, both of the first 2 Max Payne games. So I would say wait now for Remedy to do both of those. Rayman. I'm going to put Rayman as a good. I liked the first Rayman, the 2D Rayman. I had that on the PlayStation. I was relatively indifferent about Rayman 2 and 3, and I can't remember if there are any more 3D Raymans. I was indifferent about them. I had Rayman 2 on DS later as well, which I rebought it. I had it on the PlayStation. Got it, I think it was the PlayStation. Got it on the DS and played it on the DS. It was a Nintendo DS launch title. I think I got it alongside maybe Splinter Cell Chaos Theory on the DS, I think. But I was never that enamoured by the 3D titles as much as I loved the 2D version. And then Rayman Origins came along, and Rayman Origins is one of the best platform titles ever made. The ability, the way they've built out those levels so that you can go through them slowly to collect everything, but then they also feel like they're almost perfectly designed to be speedrun, and each level has a speed challenge associated with it. And the controls and the movement, I just think it's just one of the best platforming games ever made. Legends is really, really good too, and at a first glance you might think Legends is by far the better experience because it has a lot of the Rayman Origins levels in it. It has the online mode, which is fantastic, by the way. Being able to compete in like speed runs against other people in the online mode is amazing. Sorry, I thought my nose was running for a second there. Still recovering from a heavy... Oh, no, not like that. Not like that. I've been out and about in the rain and things. Sorry, when I say still recovering from a heavy weekend, I don't mean my nose is running because of certain things. I'm too old for that. I've been out in the rain and stuff over the weekend in Ireland, so I'm just worried I've got a cold. Nothing like that, I promise. Anyway, back to Rayman Legends. Rayman Legends, I thought was really good, but I think the way it changed how lums are picked up and some other things, and some of the level design I didn't think was as strong. So I actually prefer Rayman Origins, but yeah, I would give my right arm to have another Rayman game come out. If there was a third UbiArt, I think is the name of the engine they built it on. If they had another UbiArt Rayman game come out, I would be so happy because I love those games so much. Brilliant soundtracks as well. I always listen to the soundtracks. Kid Icarus, not really played that much. Psychonauts is above average for me. I am planning to play it again soon because I would like to do a video on the Milkman conspiracy level, but I need to make my way through the game to get there. Tim Schafer is a genius. If you know his work on point and clicks, Grim Fandango, for example, which is arguably the best point and click / adventure game ever made. Psychonauts I really like. I've never been as enamoured about it as some people are, and I didn't manage to get too far into the sequel for my sins. But it's an above average series and I will play the second one, so I think it deserves to be there. Saints Row is not good for me. I played the first one through to completion because I was waiting for Grand Theft Auto 4 and I wanted a Grand Theft Auto experience. I then tried to play the others. I know Saints Row 2 is held up as like the best Saints Row for a lot of people. I didn't play as much Saints Row 2. And then after that is when it really started going off the rails, right, with 3 and 4 and it all went a bit nuts. It just wasn't my bag after that. The humour didn't really land with me. Siphon Filter is another game that I don't care that much about. I played Siphon Filter 1 and 2. And no, I played 1, 2 and 3. Were there 3 on the PlayStation maybe? I played all of the Siphon Filters back in the day. I remember you had a taser and I really enjoyed tasering people. And they were good games at the time, but like I don't hold Siphon Filter in particularly high regard as a series. I'm not that fussed by it. Time Splitters is good, only because I think Time Splitters 2 is absolutely unbelievable. I think Time Splitters 1 is weak and Time Splitters 3 is not as good as 2. So I think putting it in very good would maybe be a stretch. I have been waiting for Time Splitters to return, like I'm sure many of you watching this video have, for a very, 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 very long time. I got Time Splitters 1 on the day of the PlayStation 2's launch. And Time Splitters 1 was a pretty good game. The single player was basically, you started in a level, you ran to one end while killing some people, you picked up an item, and then you ran back to the start while Time Splitters, the kind of alien baddie, I think they were, spawned in and tried to kill you. It was very, very basic. And then you could do it on harder difficulties where you had to do it in quicker times to like unlock more characters for the multiplayer or whatever, I think. The multiplayer was where it was at. It was the first game that made me start playing console shooters using a dual analog setup. I know a lot of people like to try and credit Halo for that, but it wasn't Halo. That had been around before even Time Splitters, but Time Splitters was the game that made me get into it. And obviously changes the way completely that you enjoy first-person shooters on a console once you get used to it. Time Splitters 2 was another example of a perfect sequel. What it did most brilliantly was it took the single player and turned it into almost kind of GoldenEye or Perfect Dark-esque, yes, where you had these levels you went in and you had objectives that you could tick off and there were optional objectives, but it was just so cool that they were all spread across different time zones. So you had one that was set, I think, the first one was Siberia, so it was very GoldenEye, but then there were zombies inside the dam. And then you had cathedral, Notre Dame or similar, and you had like American Prohibition kind of gangster 1930s or something. A really great game. You could create levels. The multiplayer had been built out spectacularly well as well. Virus was a particular favourite my friend and I used to play, where you had to run away from from an NPC that was on, not an NPC, a computer controlled player that was on fire, and if you got touched you were also on fire, and so eventually you had like 20 AIs all on fire chasing you, and you're trying to figure out how not to get tagged in massive great. And in Time Splitters 3 was more of the same. I don't think it was as memorable as 2, but it was a good game. Brilliant series. I'd love to see it make a return, hopefully soon. It's not going to happen though, is it? The Blob, no idea. Epic Battle Fantasy, no idea. Warhammer 40,000, I've never really played. XCOM, I have played bits of the games because I have a friend who is very passionate about XCOM, but not enough that I can make a judgment on it. I've never finished any of the XCOMs. Alone in the Dark is probably a mid for me. Alone in the Dark, I have played several of them. You have to remember, Alone in the Dark was kind of one of the games that maybe inspired... I don't know if it did directly inspire Resident Evil. I don't know if the team looked at Alone in the Dark, but Alone in the Dark very much had kind of that pre-rendered background kind of thing going on, fixed camera angles before Resident Evil came out. And then there were some interesting titles released. I mean, there was Alone in the Dark, I think 2 and 3 as well. And then there was the New Nightmare on the PlayStation, which I rather enjoyed actually. I thought it was quite a competent survival horror game. And also, as much maligned as the one on the Xbox 360 was, A New Nightmare was the PlayStation one, and then there was the one that came out on the Xbox 360 where you could open your coat to combine things. I remember watching the trailers for that or the gameplay demo for that and being blown away at all the stuff. You know, the things you could light things and fire would maybe spread and electric wires, loads of different things with physics and stuff. The game itself turned out to be pretty rubbish. Set in Central Park, I believe, and I remember spending a lot of time just faffing about in Central Park, doing busy work and stuff. I did actually finish it. I didn't hate it, though. And there's actually an Alone in the Dark game coming out in a week or two, I believe, with that dude from Stranger Things and Jodie Comer taking the lead roles. And I'm pretty intrigued to see what happens with that. That's a good game. Yeah, I'll jump back into the series. Why not? The Forest I've never played. Project Eva, never played. Darkest Dungeon, never played. Neptunia, never played. The Dark Pictures, I'm going to put never played. I have played Until Dawn. Had a great time of Until Dawn. I don't know why I'm saying it. Until Dawn. Until Dawn. Looking forward to the remaster of that. I will definitely play the remaster. As an aside, I would also like a game about The Thing. The film The Thing, I think, would be perfect in that kind of model of game. But I've actually never played any of the Dark Pictures trilogy that came after Man of Medan and the like. So Until Dawn was enough. I don't need to play like 5 more of those games. Dirt, I've never really played. Divinity Original Sin, I've never really played. Dungeon Defenders again. Mario Kart is a masterpiece franchise. There's not really a bad Mario Kart as far as I can think of. I started playing it with the SNES Mario Kart. Obviously then went up to the N64 and then Double Dash, which was the best entry up until that point. Mario Kart 8 obviously reigns supreme now. What a wonderful, wonderful game. It's just got so many tracks and drivers and everything else. It's another one of those games, like I said with Left 4 Dead earlier, you can sit down and play Mario Kart any time, any place, anywhere. You're always going to have a good time with it. It's a wonderful, wonderful franchise I hold in extremely high regard. And I actually thought myself was not a big Nintendo person, but there's a lot of Nintendo franchises very high up here, so maybe I need to reevaluate my opinions on things. Mario Party, on the other hand, saying that, I don't really care about Mario Party that much. It's one we played back in the day with friends all the time, but it was never the game I wanted to play. I was always more interested. We would spend hours playing Mario Party. I always wanted to be playing GoldenEye or Perfect Dark, really, multiplayer, or like wrestling games or fighting games. Didn't care about Mario Party. Don't really care much about it now. Not saying it's a bad series, just not really fussed. Mario Tennis, I haven't got much to add. All of the above. just whatever I said for Mario Party goes for Mario Tennis. Mario Strikers, I care even less about. I've no interest in playing a football game that isn't actually proper football. Like jokey football, no thank you. Paper Mario is mid. I have played a few Paper Mario titles. I enjoy them. I think they're fun little games. I don't know... What was the recent one I played? I played one recently. I think it was one of the older ones with stickers. I can't remember. I say recently, it was probably like 5 years ago. I don't mind Paper Mario as a franchise anyway. I don't have much to say about it. Mario and Luigi, I've never really played them. Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, I've never really played. Mega Man X, I've never really played. Mega Man Battle Network is above average for me. I really enjoyed the Mega Man Battle Network games. I played multiple. They were at a time when I was obsessed with the Game Boy Advance and did a lot of long car journeys with my parents going on holidays and things. So I played a lot of Mega Man Battle Network. I can't really remember them all that well, so I wish I could tell you more about them. But I remember having a great time with everyone. I was never let down by any of the Game Boy Advance ones I played. So I'm going to put it as above average. Mega Man Zero, I don't really know. Or ZX. Nor World of Warships. I do not know what magnifying glass is. No idea what magnifying glass is. Far Cry at this point is a mid for me. I really liked the first one, exploring the island, and then it getting a bit weird and sci-fi at the end. Far Cry 2 was a bizarre mixture of some really interesting stuff and just really annoying stuff, like the enemies just respawning all the time, having to take your malaria pills while swimming and drowning because of it. But then on the other hand, like... And your gun jamming, I think, as well. But then on the other hand, some of the combat was quite fun. Like the world of driving around like a kind of quite well-realised kind of Africa. Maybe not well-realised in terms of like realism in terms of everybody being a mercenary or whatever. But in terms of like the graphical, like the nature side of things, it was a really lovely looking game. I loved setting things on fire and watching it spread. Far Cry 3 was kind of, I guess, a soft reboot in a way. A very soft reboot. And that brought in the formula that we kind of still get to this day, and I loved Far Cry 3. But then once I played Far Cry 3 and I heard Far Cry 4 was more of the same, and Far Cry 5 was more of the same, and Far Cry 6 was more of the same, and Far Cry Primal was more of the same, that was the point. I'm not that interested in the franchise anymore. It's one of those ones, again, where if a really interesting new take on it comes out, I might play it, but I feel like I've seen enough Far Cry to know what Far Cry is. Don't really fancy playing it too much. Destiny is not good for me. I'm going to go not good. I have played probably about 20 to 25 hours of the original Destiny, and a lot of people who are watching this are going to say, well, that's not enough to make a judgment on these games, and fair enough. You know, I understand that my stipulations of having played 10 hours of an online game is not that much for a game like Destiny. The gunplay in Destiny is brilliant. It always has been. I played Destiny when it was still in beta, and it was excellent then. It was excellent when I bought the full game. Again, it's one of those things where I'm not that interested in doing a lot of content repeatedly. I'm not interested in trying to get guns that are slightly better. The whole gameplay loop just doesn't really interest me, and I've just never gone back to the series, and I never will. Jazz Jackrabbit has been around, I feel like, forever. I feel like that was a game that was around when I was about 7, but I've never really played them. Konkai, I have no idea what that is. Mega Man Legends, never played. Destroy All Humans, I've never played, but I like the look of it. When They Cry, never played. Oh dear, I hope there's some games that come up before the end that I have played. Project X Zone, I've never played. Ys, I've never played. Rising Storm, Rising Storm, I've never played. Zone of the Enders, below average probably for me. I bought the original Zone of the Enders because it came with it was very clever of Konami. They gave away the Metal Gear Solid 2 demo with Zone of the Enders. It was the only way to get it at first. I think it did later come out in like the official PlayStation Magazine demo disc or something, but at the time it was the only way to get the demo for the tanker part of Metal Gear Solid 2. I had no interest in Zone of the Enders. I'm not like a big mech person. It actually was a really, really fun game. Zone of the Enders was a really fun game, and I actually meant to go back to the second one, and I meant to do it multiple times because it got released as like a double pack, I think, didn't it? Maybe they remastered it or upped the resolution or something for PlayStation 3, I think. So I've been meaning to go back to it. So I'm not like disinterested in Zone of the Enders. May play the second one at some point. I'd say it's unlikely, but I don't mind it. Killing Floor, I've never really played. I apologise. I know there's a lot here that I haven't played, but you know, what can you do? Rise of Triad, I've never played. Turok, yeah, below average. The first one came out around the time of GoldenEye, and GoldenEye was just so intensely superior to it. I remember it had some platforming sections in that I tried to do and didn't like. Turok 2, the Cerebral Bore, was a very fun weapon, and it was an improvement over the original Turok, I thought. And then there was that Turok I kind of hoped would be good that came out, I think, on the Xbox 360, PS3 and PC, which was the more modernised take, where you could maybe like attract dinosaur, you know, you could like get you could play the dinosaurs and like the AI dudes with guns off against each other by maybe attracting the dinosaurs to the dudes and things, like another first person shooter. I was kind of intrigued by it, but then I think I played a demo and the reviews came out and it turned out to be quite middling, so I never bothered. Yeah, I don't really care about it that much, but at the same time, like Dino Crisis, give me a cool game about shooting dinosaurs and I'm right back in there. Parasite Eve, my interest is mid. I can only remember the first one particularly well. So they changed the formula, I believe. The first Parasite Eve was more of a kind of picking things from a menu, almost like an RPG. with the main character Aya Brea, I believe her name was. Maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong. Maybe that's not even her name. I might have made that up. But I really liked it. And then the second one was a bit more action orientated. What's stopping me from putting these any higher? Because I do remember being fond of them, but I can't remember them that well at all. I played these games maybe over 20 years ago. I just can't remember enough. So I'm going to put them at mid because I have an interest in the series. If I heard there was a new Parasite Eve, I'd definitely look into it. And it might even prompt me to go back and play, or at least check out someone's retrospective of these ones as well. But I can't really go beyond that. Police Quest I've never really played. I've never heard of Mega Man Star Force. I think I played SWAT 3 quite a bit, but I can't remember whether I did enough. I played enough of it. I don't think I finished it, so I can't make my opinion. Jagged Alliance I've never heard of. Flashpoint I've only ever played bits of. The Fancy Pants Adventures I've never heard of. And Warhammer I've never really played. So there we go. Well, that's quite a lot in the never played. Sorry about that. It's quite a lot in the never played, but hopefully there's quite a lot in the other ones as well. So look, I'm going to end the video because I've been talking for a long time. My mouth is dry, my throat is starting to hurt, and I'm sure you're more than bored of the sound of my own voice at this point. But do get in touch in the comments and tell me how stupid I am about certain franchises and why I'm completely wrong about them. Again, I just want to reiterate, this is just how much interest and how much I care about certain series. Like, they're all great. Most of the series in this video are great series. Look, we've not Postal aside. So, you know, there has to be bottom ranks and top ranks. This is just my personal opinion. So, you know, there's nothing too deep to it. I hope you enjoyed the video anyway. And yeah, if you did, do consider letting me know your thoughts and subscribing and things. And I'll catch you soon.